And we're live. What's up, everybody? What's up? Oh, sorry, Peach. How do you like that as a little live stream intro? Hi, Peach. Anyways, this is a spontaneous stream. What are we going to talk about today? Oh, Peach, I'm sitting here. You could either be in my lap. Actually, my computer's in my lap, so you can go back to your podium, okay? Don't be. Okay, Peach. Okay. Oh, and she's gone. Sorry about that. Okay, what are we doing today? I don't know. Whatever we want to, I guess. Welcome. I see we have Mutinous here tuning in from Twitter, Emperor Ghidorah here on YouTube. We also have this running on Discord. Awesome. My day's going well, and thank you. Yeah, Peach is very cute. She's she's old now, though. She's like 19 or something, 18. I took her off the streets when she was, I think, around 9. I've had her for quite some time. She'll probably come back at some point. Anyways, yeah, so look, we're going to do some Q&A. We're going to review some videos. If you have a video you want me to review, send it over. I know we have one of the viewers, Annika, asked me, Annika or Anika, however I pronounce it, please correct me or let me know how it's pronounced. Shout out to Annika or Anika, asked me to review something, so we'll do that one. And we'll do a few more. We'll do some Q&A, and we'll even do a call-in show. And we'll see how long we run this for. Callistos Cali says, are Israelis against the Gaza war continuing? Yeah, the majority support a ceasefire and a return of the hostages. If the hostages were returned, though, would it still be the majority? That's unclear, right? There's the majority of the energy behind the protests is get the hostages home, and they realize that can only happen through a ceasefire deal, not through military pressure. And also, Israelis don't want more of their soldiers to die. That's the majority of the energy. There is a small but growing movement of Israelis that are actually concerned with the death of Gazan civilians, and we're seeing more and more and louder voices with that message as well. So yeah, that's probably how I would break it down. Hubert asked thoughts on Tal Oran. So I actually spoke to him this week. I know Tal. We're friends, or at the very least, I should say we're friendly, but we definitely have our fair share of disagreements. And we're going to have a debate soon. I've been, he said he's down. We just need to find a time. He's in Israel as well, so we'll probably just do it in person. So we just need to coordinate that. So yeah, stay tuned, me and Tal. Before October 7th, he was just doing traveling content, and I liked him more then. He went all full Israel propaganda since. And again, I'm not one that lets people's views affect my ability to be civil with them and even have friendships with them. So all good between us, but I don't have respect for his views and approach on Israel-Palestine. And I have no problem sharing that with him, right? We're gonna debate this. But yeah, we'll do it in person. It'll be friendly, good faith, and I think people will enjoy it. Hubert also asked, why do you think Bibi is continuing the war? Well, first of all, I think he needs to keep his coalition intact, right? Ben Gvir and Smotrich both are part of his coalition, and they have leverage over him. For him to not go to elections, for his coalition to stay alive, he needs to continue the war. He needs Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Now, if he was seeing the polling, he is definitely going to win, then maybe he'd say, you know what, I don't need this coalition. Let's go to elections. I'll just win again. but it doesn't seem like he's going to win. And hopefully, like maybe he thinks, time's on his side. Maybe he'll succeed in defeating Hamas. Maybe he'll be able to ethnically cleanse Gazans, and that will change public opinion enough in his favor, right? Because he has an interest to continue this until the public forgives him for his failures of October 7th. So the longer it goes, right now he's still not been forgiven, right? So in his mind, he may feel that the longer it goes, the greater the chance of him getting some real victory in Gaza that will get the public to forgive him. And then we could look from a purely, these are all self-interested things that I focused on, but he genuinely may believe that this is what's best for the country, that we need to stay in Gaza for as long as possible, that we can't let Hamas rise to power. So I'm sure that also plays into it, but I think he's primarily driven by his desire for self-preservation, and staying in Gaza increases the chance that he stays in power. Emperor Ghidorah says, will you consider doing more debunking streams? Yeah, I'm down. I enjoy doing the debunking. So just send over things you want debunked, and we can do it. Definitely. Emperor Ghidorah is saying, I'm friends with a guy who's a Zionist. He denies it's a genocide, but has agreed Israel is planning ethnic cleansing. He just can't accept Israel's mass slaughter of civilians. Okay, well, I mean, that's something. At least he's somewhat connected to reality. Although, many Israelis, I think, would agree that Israel would like to ethnically cleanse Gaza because that's what they themselves want, yeah. But I think there's the extent to which, right, I think where there's real debate is to what extent is Israel trying to kill civilians, or to what extent is there just a general disregard for civilian well-being? And if you're just using massive amounts of firepower, anytime you see someone suspicious or get some intel that Hamas might be somewhere, that's not intentionally targeting civilians, it's just callous indifference. And those two things can seem indistinguishable at times. I think there's legitimate debate. And I actually believe the latter to be much more plausible. I don't like individual soldiers. Some of them will just shoot unarmed people. The people operating the drones and the quadcopters, I'm not sure what the chain of command there is. If it's just somebody behind a screen that can pull the trigger, maybe there's also just recklessness. When it comes to actual airstrikes from jets, that's like based on intel, and that's much harder to say, okay, we're going to blow up this home because there's a family of civilians there. Generally, that works. Generally, the way that would look is, okay, there's some tunnel system under this building. We have intel that some commander might be in that tunnel. If we don't know the for certain that we'll kill him, but we might. But if we take the shot, then we'll kill 20 plus civilians. Go for it. Right? That's how Israel on a top-down level is functioning, more so than saying, okay, kill that civilian, kill that civilian, kill that civilian. That's why it's also unlikely you're unlikely to have a whistleblower saying, yes, I got a command from above, unless it's your commander, but not way from above saying, let's kill these civilians. It's not going to look like that. It's if a country wanted to destroy a population in whole or in part while maintaining plausible deniability, this is what it would look like. Hubert says it seems that Israel is going to be isolated internationally once the boomers die off. Doesn't that mean Israel's days are numbered? No, I don't think the U.S. currently is so the U.S. establishment currently is so pro-Israel, not just because the public is pro-Israel. There's many factors, Israel being in the U.S. sphere of influence. The defense contractors have interest in funding for Israel because most of that money is spent back on U.S. weapons companies, lobbyist groups. So the younger generation, we are seeing a shift in the U.S. and in other Western countries where it's moving from pro-Israel to pro-Palestine. But because the establishment is still so pro-Israel, the establishment's not going to shift overnight to be anti-Israel. At least not overnight, within a few decades perhaps. But I think there's going to be that in-between period that is where the most magic can happen. And again, this is a guess. It might not play out this way, but I could see a situation where the people are no longer pro-Israel. Politicians can't just be blindly supportive of Israel like they currently are, but the establishment is still, and institutions are still pro-Israel, that politicians will need to take a more balanced and moderate approach to Israel-Palestine. And hopefully that will cause the U.S. not to just abandon Israel entirely, because then the second Israel gets abandoned by the U.S., it might increase the chance that Israel gets destroyed, but the U.S. no longer has leverage over Israel's decisions. So if the U.S. keeps the alliance but puts necessary pressure on Israel to make concessions and do what's needed for long and just peace, then that very well might be what's needed to solve the conflict. So I have some level of optimism in seeing the trajectory of U.S. public opinion shift. Let's see. Oh, I see we now have people here on Discord. Welcome, Discord people. Good to see you. But let me continue to expand on that, Hubert. The question is, are Israel's days numbered? I mean, maybe. Regardless, maybe. It's unclear, First of all, the world changes so fast these days. It's hard to imagine what the world is going to look like in 10 years, 20 years. Will we even have the same concept of a nation state the way we have today? That's unclear. Second, we have demographic challenges. The two fastest growing populations in Israel, neither of them are really supportive of the state. You have the ultra-Orthodox community, and you have Arab Israelis, or also known as Palestinian citizens of Israel. They're the two fastest growing populations. For the most part, they're not Zionist populations. So what does that mean? And also, we saw even our weakest enemy, Hamas, what they were able to do in a surprise attack, and we could learn from that and have better defense. But at the end of the day, if there's this constant desire to destroy us, as weapons get more powerful, eventually they might succeed. So if we had to do a prediction market on which country is least likely to survive the next few decades, Israel will be one of the least likely to survive the next few decades, right? Now, and I'm not saying that this means there's a high chance Israel ceases to exist within the next few decades, but there's certainly a higher chance than, I would say, most other countries. But there's probably some countries that are even higher chance that I'm just not aware of. Callistos Callis says, can you explain why the callous indifference? Is it because of hatred? So this is in reference to Israel operating in a way where there's a callous indifference towards civilian lives. So there's a few ways to look at it. I don't think hatred is really how decisions are made on a top-down level. One is that every consideration you take for civilians, you put yourself at a disadvantage tactically in fighting Hamas, right? So it doesn't need to come from hatred. Imagine there could be no hatred and just complete indifference. I just don't care. Why would you put yourself at any disadvantage if you can to fight Hamas. So again, let's say you see suspicious activity in a building. You're not sure it's Hamas, but you don't want to risk your soldiers. Why take the chance to blow up the building, right? Or again, as I mentioned, there might be intel that there's a tunnel system under this residential building and there's a high-ranking militant there. If you evacuate the building, then the militant in there also might escape. So why do you want to put yourself at a disadvantage? Okay, so you kill civilians, right? So that's how a lot of the decisions are made, with a low level of regard for civilians, as to not put Israel. Israel wants to get any advantage they could over Hamas and protect their own soldiers as much as possible. So that's the way to look at it. And then there could be another motivation in addition to that. If the goal really is to relocate Gazans out of Gaza, then there is a clear benefit to harming some amount of the civilians, because in the 21st century, while the world is focusing on Gaza, it's not easy to forcefully make people leave. The way it's being framed, even by Israel and Trump, it's no, they're going to voluntarily relocate. Okay, but people obviously will want to voluntarily relocate if they're living in an area where all their infrastructure has been destroyed and their chance of dying is extremely high. So by making Gaza unlivable and by making life for Gazans unbearable, you increase the chance of them voluntarily relocating. So that could be another motivation. Let's see. What Not Sense says, Israel destroyed a large apartment complex, which it has 2 Hamas cameras in Gaza City. That seems disproportionate. They can snipe boys' testicles. They can snipe those cameras. Yeah, the whole thing where they've been blowing up these towers and saying Hamas uses that for X, Y, Z, that's almost certainly bullshit, and I'll tell you how we can know that. First of all, and this is another thing that there's a lot of misinformation around. We always hear Hamas utilization of civilian infrastructure. That's not happening to nearly the extent people are saying it is. Infrastructure is much safer underground than it is above ground. Hamas has a very clear incentive, a clear tactical incentive to put as much infrastructure below ground than above ground. And also, we're just not seeing evidence. Israel has every incentive to show the world, look, here is a video, here's a photo of Hamas using this building that is a residential building to do X, Y, Z. We're not seeing that. We've seen almost none of that since October 7th. So that's one reason we could know that this giant tower is not housing Hamas operations, or we can know with a high degree of certainty. The other is that, and then, one of the claims is, yeah, but there's a tunnel system underneath it, and they're using that. If there's intel that Hamas is using a building or a tunnel system under a building, Israel would have struck it a long time ago. We're 2 years into this. So now they're just striking it because they're trying to get everybody to leave Gaza City. They're taking down the biggest buildings. It's a way to scare people into leaving. It's a form of collective punishment. That is by far the most plausible explanation for what Israel's doing. And that's not even a stretch. That's not hyperbole. There's Hamas involved. It would have been blown up a long time ago if Hamas was using it. So don't buy that narrative. Emperor says, do you watch Bad Empanada video essays? I know he acted a bit wacko to you, but I think he's a fantastic advocate for Palestinian liberation and is very effective in combating Hezbollah. No, and look, here's the thing. I don't consume all too much like YouTuber or streamer content. And he's unhinged. I do imagine he does some good work, but I don't know. Is his efforts net positive for the cause? Perhaps, but when you're so unhinged, people every unhinged person in a movement impacts how that movement is perceived, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the guy. Just he's, as you said, he acted a bit wacko. Yeah, that's for sure. But if you want me to review one of his things, I will. The one thing I did watch of his was his review on the Gaza death toll, which I thought was good. He made a few mistakes there. That's actually what got me to email him for the first time, which he responded in a real negative fashion to. But it was that inspired me to message him. What nonsense says Israel as a state will survive? It has a Samson option to shield it. NYC and DC are on their nucleus. Golda threatened Nixon to get conventional weapons back in '73. If she had, yeah, I'm not. What do you? I'm gonna need a source for NYC and DC are on their nucleus. What is this nucleus? Can you send something? Having a Samson option, which is essentially, and this isn't a publicly stated policy, if I understand correctly. It's we could look into it, but Samson option is essentially if Israel's back is against the wall and it's going to be destroyed, it'll just nuke whatever country it needs to. Which doesn't even mean, even if that's Israel's publicly stated policy, it's more effective as a deterrent than an actual action. Just the thought that Israel might do it can deter certain enemies, but that on its own doesn't allow for a state to survive. It's far beyond that. For example, if Israel gets sanctioned and the economy takes a hit and you start to have brain drain, which Israel's already experiencing, a lot of the top talent have left Israel. If they're, tourism goes down to zero, that's another blow to the economy. Again, people are leaving. There's constant rocket attacks. It just becomes it's a state that slips into darkness and just within a generation dismantles or transforms into something so different that it's no longer Israel as we know it. So it doesn't need to collapse overnight. It could be a process of a decade of just constant degradation as a state. Yeah. Hubert says, I've heard that Israelis are extremely sensitive to casualties more than usual. Yeah, for sure, because it's a very small country. And whenever somebody's killed, we all hear about it. I remember back in the Facebook days, this was in the 2014, maybe the 2014 Gaza operation. Every time someone was killed, I would search their name on Facebook, and I'd see that I had dozens of mutual friends with them, right? It's a small country, so you feel it much more. If you're, let's say, an American and a soldier dies in Iraq, you might live in California, this soldier's in Kansas. Yeah, you're both American, but it's worlds apart. Here, it's a tiny country. There's just a few degrees of separation between everybody. And by a few, I mean probably two. There's probably 2 degrees of separation connecting the entire country. Bad Empanada. So we Pope gives his thoughts on Bad Empanada. He says he's a terrible advocate by calling even people like Owen Jones traitors and pro-Israeli. He makes the Palestinian movement seem unserious and wacky. I could see him having that effect, for sure. Can Israeli society start to view all of the Palestinians as indigenous people of the land and take responsibility of their well-being themselves? I mean, they can, but they won't. That we're far from that happening. I think that's the way to look at indigeneity. 2 indigenous people who need to find a way to share the land, but Israel's very scared of giving Palestinians full citizenship because of the demographic concern it poses. If all Palestinians between the river and the sea are citizens, that's around 50% of the population. That's not a reality most Israelis are comfortable with. So that can happen after years of peace and security and a reconciliation process. It could happen and very well might be the most beautiful and just solution. But it's not, again, not something that could happen overnight. It's a process. Ibn Safi says, where's the IDF headquarters located? In Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, the Kiryat is the main base. Let's see. Centrani says, what do y'all think about GDF? What's GDF? Am I meant to know what that is? Like GHF is Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Am I having a brain fart? I could ask ChatGPT, but ChatGPT will give me like 30 different things. What is GDF in reference to Israel-Palestine? What Nonsense says, I think Netanyahu knows Israel is a pariah regardless of when it ends, so why not make the most of the opportunity as they may not have it again? Yeah, I think that's that's a fair way to look at it. Like what perhaps one of his motivations? No, ChatGPT didn't give me anything relevant. The Guyana Defense Force, the military organization Guyana, unrelated to Israel or Palestine. Okay, why are you telling me that? Kelly Marie Appleby. That's a cute name. I could say many things, but I just want to express my love and gratitude for the Jewish people here who have seriously had to go against the grain of everything they have ever been taught. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And she continues, it's neither simple nor straightforward to break out of brainwashing or familial ties. You have my utmost respect. I do very much appreciate that. Thankfully, my family, as much as they view the world differently from me, I have not been disowned. Most of my extended family are far right wingers, settlers, and they too accept me. Now, granted, they probably don't know everything I'm posting on Twitter, but they know what I do and a lot of what I believe. But there's definitely some level of societal backlash for speaking out publicly. And even if you don't want to speak out publicly, it's still a lot of unlearning to do for sure. Yeah. And the question is, how do you scale the unlearning, you know? Aside from like microdosing, like putting some kind of microdose of psilocybin or MDMA in the water, that could work, but you know, I don't know about there's some ethical considerations with doing stuff like that, but might be worth it. There's a good podcast called Call Me Back, which gives good insights into how the Israeli governments think. Interesting. I haven't heard of that, but I'll check them out. I'm hearing now GDF is a popular YouTuber, does video essays about Israel being evil for lack of a... Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen him. He doesn't show his face, right? It's just his voice and some... I've seen some of his stuff. Okay. Let's see. Lucid Words goes 90+% of so-called Palestinians immigrated to the area in the last 100 years from Turkey, Egypt, Syria. No, that's been debunked, my guy. You gotta update your knowledge. There was certainly immigration in the end of the 19th and 20th century, but Definitely not 90+%. Not even close. That's a claim from what's that propaganda book written by that woman? What's that book? Maybe somebody can tell me. Yeah, but that's not true. How should Israelis handle Iran? Try to make peace with them, I guess. That's the best way. Like militarily, it's clear we have an advantage. We demonstrated that, but even that costed us a bunch of lives and economic toll. And the airport was closed for a week. No other countries managed to close our airport for that amount of time. And look, I don't know. Iran's not just going to accept Israel as long as the Israel-Palestine conflict persists. So all roads lead back to Palestine. But there's no reason to think that even these extreme governments, whether it's Hamas, whether it's the Iranian government, that their views are static and unchangeable. There's no reason to think that way, because if they're unchangeable, they would be the first organizations in history that were unchangeable. Every single organization that's existed for enough time has reformed over time. It's all about what are the conditions that we need to create to increase the chance that they're reformed in a way that is conducive to peace. So when it comes to Iran, you have, their government, they're all old, they're dying soon. We even see society becoming more and more liberal. They're not enforcing Sharia in schools like they were in the past. Iran and the UAE have been warming up to one another. The UAE is an ally to the US and to Israel. These are all signs of change, right? So I think we need to build on that. But it's hard for me to see them ever normalizing ties with Israel unless there's regime change, which doesn't seem like there's a high chance of that happening, or we make peace with them. And the Iranian people deserve a better government than what they have, right? And Gazans deserve a better government than Hamas. These obviously are not the ideal partners to negotiate peace with, not even close. And they're not the ideal governments for the rights of their people. So if there's a way to change their government with a much better government, then I would support that. But the only conceivable way to do that is massive amounts of violence with no guarantee of success. So I think if you're ever going to justify killing people, you should have no other alternative and a relatively high chance of success. Here, there are other alternatives, and the chance of success is relatively low. So when that's the paradigm, the mass killing of civilians, in that case, should be hard to justify. Lucid continues saying, most Palestinians are not native to the area. This lies about Palestine, and Palestinians are what causes the conflict in the first place. No, what causes conflict in the first place are people like you who try to demonize and dehumanize full populations. You're no different than the people that are saying Israelis all need to leave, or there is Jews have no connection to land. Those people, right? Those people who say Jews have no connection to land? Look in the mirror. That's you. You're no different from them. You're not morally better. You're not psychologically different. That's you. Now, if we want to get into the DNA, Palestinians have a higher percentage of Bronze Age Levantine DNA than Jews. Now, the cool thing is, all the different Jewish populations have Bronze Age Levantine DNA, and so do the Palestinian populations. They, on average, have more, but we both share this DNA. That's beautiful. That should be something to unify us. But this whole claim that they just come from someplace else, it's bullshit. It's not grounded in anything. Okay, cool. I'm seeing a lot of people tell me GDF. Cool. Yes, I have seen some of his stuff. Was Abu Ubaidah assassinated? Yeah, yeah, he was assassinated like a week or two ago. Is Netanyahu picking a fight with Egypt? No, I don't think so. I mean, he definitely doesn't have any interest in that happening. What Egypt has moved troops into Sinai, which is against the treaty they have with Israel, and this is them essentially saying don't even try to ethnically cleanse Gazans into Sinai. That's kind of them, you know, um, taking a stance against that. And Netanyahu either threatened or actually canceled the energy deal that was just signed between Israel and Egypt because of their violation of the treaty. But I don't think he wants to fight with them. I think they're just playing hardball with each other right now. Yeah, Hubert says there's never been an ideology that has remained the same for decades. Yeah, exactly. Never in the history of the world. It's why, and it's unfortunate because the prevailing narrative in Israeli society in the pro-Israel camp is Hamas can never change, will never change. They just need to be destroyed. And I can understand there's something intuitive in thinking that, but if you actually look through history, there's no reason to actually think that's the case. And especially when you had an example where the PLO used to be more extreme than Hamas, and through negotiation, they moderated, recognized Israel's right to exist in 1993, and have now had decades of security cooperation with Israel. That was through negotiation. That wasn't through force. So we've seen it done time and time again. The leader of Syria is ex Al Qaeda, is open to normalizing ties with Israel. So Israel needs to be dedicated to the peace process and to finding a just solution and stop blaming other factions for why it can't happen. Now, again, it's not like Hamas is the ideal partner for peace, not even close. But this, what have we done for the past few decades? We have the PA with their moderation. We've rewarded them by taking more land, expanding settlements, more checkpoints, right? So we didn't really reward moderation, and the narrative in Israeli society is there's no partner for peace, there's no one to talk to, so we need to maintain the status quo. But it's a status quo that's immoral and unsustainable, a status quo that will always lead to more violence. Nikia says Israelis deserve a better government too. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. We have a broken political system where you have a situation where the majority of the country hate Netanyahu, and yet he's still able to win elections. So clearly there's a problem with how this democracy functions. Looks like we have a fly that's joined our live stream. See, I'm in the Galilee, so you don't even know if that fly is Jewish or Palestinian, right? And if they're Palestinian, they could be Christian, they could be Muslim, or they could be Druze. That's the beauty of the Galilee. Oh, lucid words. They're saying, I can't with this guy. He responds to stuff an hour after I write them. Can't debunk his bullshit. Well, I'm sorry. I can't answer multiple questions in real time. Do you want to join me for a live stream so you could debunk me? You want me to send you a link? You want to join? I studied biology in uni. All these DNA tests are politically biased, but the masses are ignorant. Okay, now you're getting conspiratorial. So now DNA tests aren't real. Bro, it's crazy how similar your arguments are to. People say that about Jewish DNA as well. They say, no, that's just a conspiracy. There's no connection. Jews have no connection to the land. Yeah, we get it, Lucid. You're just a run-of-the-mill husbarista. Doesn't bring anything unique to the table, doesn't bring anything new to the table, just the standard, towing the standard pro-Israel line. We've seen it. It's boring. It's unproductive. And thankfully, it's dying. It's a dying ideology. It's thank God this cringe is becoming more and more marginal. It does nothing for humanity. It does nothing to solve the conflict. It does nothing to make Jews safe. It's just toxic. It's anti-truth, anti-humanity. Good luck. Good luck to you, Lucid. Nomad says, how do you think the Israeli political system will change post-Gaza war and post-Netanyahu? What changes do you think should be made? Surrealism versus idealism. Is that meant to continue? Because I only see that. I don't know how it will change. Next in line seems to be Naftali Bennett, who is to the right of Netanyahu. So and Bennett is a little bit less of a status quo guy. I think he will try to actually make big changes. Netanyahu hasn't. He's been kind of just risk averse, playing it safe, status quo. That's kind of been his thing. So Bennett will try to change things, but it's unclear if he'll change things for the better. So it's not like you have some revolutionary peacemaker waiting to be elected. You don't. The left is very small in Israel. And I would say between Labor and Hadash, how many mandates are they getting? I don't even know. But the left is weak, and it's unclear what needs to happen for them to be strong. But it might require just the U.S. Putting their foot down and saying, "That's it, Israel. You can't keep maintaining this brutal occupation over another people. The status quo is unacceptable. We're not gonna stand for it." And then it doesn't matter if you have the left or the right in power. It'll be somebody who hopefully will be forced into making these concessions. Yeah. Now, how do I think it should change? Well, you're asking how would I change the political system, or who would I like to see in power, or what do you think I think Israel should do? Well, okay, let's say, what would I want a prime minister to do? First of all, just make a public declaration that peace is back on the table, that we are now negotiating with whatever parties are in charge, with a goal for long-term peace to be achieved within the next 10 years. Make a public declaration to our people and do it in a way that inspires hope, that tells them this is our only way of survival and we have the power to do this. Really inspire the nation to believe that peace is possible. Sorry, I have cat fur all over my face now. I'm getting all itchy. Anyways, so that's one. Two would then begin that process, start good faith measures. So I would change, we can't just pull all the soldiers out of the West Bank overnight. That's not feasible, not logistically or politically. Why? Because you have 500,000 Jews living there. Who's going to ensure their protection? So then you can say, okay, then you should remove them unilaterally. Well, that's also something very, politically very hard to do, logistically very hard to do, and that should be done if that's ever done. And I don't think that needs to be done as part of a long-term peace. I don't think you need to remove anybody from their homes to achieve lasting peace. But if, let's say, that is done, that should be part of a peace agreement and not done unilaterally. But what can we do? What are good faith measures we could do? We could change the way the IDF is interacting with Palestinians. The entire security apparatus there could be transformed into something completely different. It could be an Israeli-Palestinian peacekeeping force that both Israelis and Palestinians view as protectors, rather than one side viewing them as a protector and the other side viewing them as an oppressor. Right? So that's a shift that's feasible that Israel could do. We could start to change the education system a little bit to make it to make the population more oriented towards peace, but do this with the PA and with whoever's governing Gaza to agree to do the same, right? And every change Israel decides to make should be also used to negotiate the other side to try to make some concession to ready their population for peace with the other side. So that's one that we could focus on, the education system. We could let all nonviolent prisoners out of jail, or any prisoner that hasn't gone to trial, they should be released. Right? Just stop the policy of these detentions without trial. Halt building all new settlements. Right? No more settlement expansion. We're here to achieve peace. What else would I do? That's a whole bunch that we could start with. That if you start doing that, and you do it in a way where you're selling this to the public, right now you look at public opinion, how one side feels about the other, how they feel about a two-state solution. If you undergo that process where you can inspire the population and give them hope in a better future, and take real tangible steps to bring us even just a little bit closer. If you look at the shift in public opinion then compared to now, there'll be a significant change, and I could guarantee you that. Now, in terms of what the government should look like, right now we have this parliamentary democracy that's based off the British system, which just for whatever reason it does not work for our culture. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the best form of governance needs to be, but this one's not working. Okay, now we know lucid words is not just extreme. He really has no idea what he's talking about. He goes, next in line, Bennett shows how ignorant you are. Wow, he has no following. Bro, this isn't even contested. We have polling data. Every poll from the last 6 months shows that if Bennett runs, he gets the most mandates. If you're going to come swinging with such little knowledge, have some humility, my guy. You're embarrassing yourself. Otto says every time Adar does live chat, there's one person of this type. Yeah, that's the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate the diversity, but okay, I'm not giving Lucid more attention unless he says something interesting or insightful. We do deal with these people all the time. Let's one of the best ways to let the ideology die, debunk it in a meaningful way, but sometimes we just need to ignore it. It's just so cringe. Sub-Zero says, I would like to at least reconsider your position on Hamas use of structure in pop-up attacks and booby traps and the stated rationale of the IDF taking these structures down. Oh, no, that's well within my position. We do know Hamas uses, there's usage of evacuated civilian infrastructure. That's for sure. That we actually see evidence of, right? But often we hear, well, the reason why the civilian death toll is so high is because of militarized civilian infrastructure. They're implying It's militarized infrastructure that is occupied by civilians, but that we're not seeing that. Yeah, you have abandoned buildings that are booby-trapped. So one of the rationales for Israel destroying full neighborhoods, aside from, some motivation to make Gaza unlivable, is, let's say you assess that 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 homes are booby-trapped. It's still a lot of homes booby-trapped. It's dangerous to go one by one and find out what's booby-trapped. So let's just destroy them all, right? That's what I mentioned at the beginning. If you don't want to take risks, the less risks you take, the more that comes at the expense of what you're going to do to civilians. So I'm with you on that point, Sub-Zero. I think we know that to be true. And they'll sometimes pop up out of a tunnel and then go back in the tunnel. But again, these aren't from homes that have families in them. And we see this from the videos. Hamas, most of the videos we have of Hamas attacks are from Hamas. And we see they come out of a tunnel that's under rubble, pop out, pop back in. Israel is not producing video evidence of buildings in use by civilians where Hamas is operating. We're just not seeing that. Now, they're very plausibly, not very plausibly, we know they're operating in tunnels under Gaza, so these tunnels are under populated areas, yeah. That we know them to be doing, but utilization, we constantly hear utilizing civilian infrastructure for military purposes. That's just not reflected in the evidence, nor is it tactically, is there a tactical reason for them to do so? George says, that's great, Adar, but as Danny said, unless you deal with the root of the problem, Zionism itself, and also don't have a clearly defined solution that easily shows how peace and a new future will work, one does not have anything. Per Danny, there has to be a beacon of Jews and Christians and Muslims who understand and see a clear future. Still, what you're suggesting is great, and this medium creates dialogue, and from freedom and competition of ideas, we'll come up with the best one. Yeah, I don't think you actually need to do that. It's almost like it comes from the United States never truly confronted what they did to the Native population. They never truly confronted what they did to Black Americans. They just changed it. There was a civil rights movement, and that civil rights movement caused them to pass laws, and it took way too long, but caused them to pass laws which created a more equitable system. There was never saying we now need to address the racist. This is what the woke movement is trying to do. They're saying no, equality under the law is not enough. We need to look at every single institution and dismantle them and rebuild them. But the reason that's not a popular ideology is because it's kind of vague, and it's not being explained. What do you mean by address the root cause? So if you mean look at the root of the problem and just create equality in every single institution, sure, we should have a civil rights movement that creates a more equitable system. But the idea that the only way to move forward is for us to just come out and say, you know what, we are renouncing Zionism. It is done. It is XYZ. And I'm not in opposition to that happening, right? I just don't in any way think that's necessary to reform the system. And I think, and I know a lot of people would like to see that happen, but we should not let idealism get in the path of progress. Never. So, people want it. It almost comes from a place of justice. The Palestinians want Israelis to apologize for all the wrong they've done and acknowledge that they did X, Y, Z. And I agree that acknowledging of wrongdoing is going to help the reconciliation process. But just based on historical examples, I'm not convinced that needs to happen in order to solve the conflict. And I think the United States is just a very clear example of why that it doesn't need to happen that way. So George says, I agree, but the USA, everyone is equal under the law. I totally agree. The woke movement is totally disastrous, but in the USA, there's no flag or anthem pushing one race or religion over others. So yeah, but you need to understand what we have in Israel proper, the West Bank is much harder. Gaza is much harder because Israel doesn't want a demographic concern. But Palestinian citizens of Israel and non-Jews living in Israel are far, far more equal to Jewish Israelis than blacks were in the Jim Crow era. Right. So we're far beyond what America was for most of its existence. Now, so it's a matter like how do you get that extra few steps to make it even better, right? Repeal the nation state law. The symbolism is a tricky one, but I agree. It's if you have Jewish symbolism, will the 20% non-Jewish population ever truly feel part of society? I think that's something that needs to be discussed and thought about. But I think we should look at it in these terms, right? Like, what's the problem in the institutions now? How do we transform that institution to solve that problem? And I'm glad we agree that woke movement is totally disastrous. Yeah. Nikia says, I just watched Shimo Duntan's The Settlers here on YouTube. Highly recommend. Naftali Bennett gives a speech at an illegal settlement. It shows on what's waiting in the wings. Nothing good. Yeah, that's not surprising. Ibn says, Adar, have you ever thought about entering Israeli politics? I don't have much interest in doing that. My views, as sensible and pragmatic as they may seem to some, in Israeli society, I'm an extremist, which is unfortunate. But my relevance in Israeli politics, with the views I hold currently, is very low relevance. Now, hopefully it changes. You know, you do have people like Alon Lee Green, who is just, you know, his name is becoming bigger and bigger. I hope he enters politics. There are players in the left that are up and coming. And also, you know, I'm fluent in Hebrew, but because I don't do these live streams in Hebrew, I'm not nearly as articulate in Hebrew. So I would just need to really work on it. And I should honestly. And I do talk to Israelis, right? But I don't have the same level of, I just can't navigate the same way just because of lack of practice on this topic. But I speak to my family, my settler cousins, people I meet here and there. And I'll be honest, it's a very different approach. When speaking to people who are really, you know, Zionists, especially right-wing Zionists, you need to approach it from a place of their own, like not in a place that demonizes Israel in any way, but kind of speaks to their pride. We're a strong nation. You know, the idea that we can achieve peace is not thinking highly enough of who we are and what we're capable of. What do you mean we can't achieve peace? Obviously we can. We're capable of anything. You know, you speak in those terms like, wait a minute, we can achieve peace, you know? And also, if you could humanize Palestinians to them in a way. You just need to be gentle about it. But no, I don't have any plans to enter Israeli politics, not in the near future. Otto says, show me one peer-reviewed paper claiming most Gazans are Egyptians. Yeah, Otto, you're not going to get anything from him. There's nothing on it. It's just a bullshit claim. Are flights still in and out of Ben Gurion today and tomorrow? What do you mean by today and tomorrow? Meaning, like, are there currently flights? Yeah. The airport's operational. It was just closed for the 12 days 12-day war with Iran. But aside from that, it's open. It's not. I don't think you have all airlines flying in like regular times, but yeah, you could get in and out of Israel. Hubert says, who do you think should be Israeli PM? I like Yair Golan. He's the most relevant leader on the left, but he doesn't have any chance of being prime minister, not in the near future. Who runs the Hadash party? I should know this, honestly, but I'm going to vote either for Yair Golan's party or Hadash party. Hadash is the Jewish Palestinian party. Ayman Oda is the leader of Hadash. Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're not. Neither of them are relevant for prime minister. But hopefully they'll be in some coalition. Like, that's possible. IDF, what nonsense says IDF uses empty schools and facilities upon leaving, they blow it up. Very weird. Yeah, that's true. That is a matter of policy. And their publicly stated justification for doing so is just in case we don't leave anything inside that Hamas can then retrieve, we will burn down or blow up the building or demolish the building, which shows a low level of care for civilian infrastructure, right? Instead of taking 30 minutes to make sure you didn't leave anything, just destroy it. What nonsense says, did you hear about IDF using the Palestinians in IDF uniforms with an IED attached to them to investigate buildings for traps? Soldiers called the human shield beings mosquitoes. Yeah, well, there was the first report of that probably like 6 months ago, where they did this with a 72-year-old man. They were sending him, they didn't connect any IED to him, but they were just sending him in multiple buildings to see if it's booby trapped. Eventually, they released him, and another nearby unit just shot him dead, which was a significant report because it highlighted 2 war crimes by 2 units working side by side. I saw something posted today that there's a new report about this. I didn't read it, but send it over. I'm happy to take a look. I mean, I think it's, I mean, at this point, it definitely isn't going to surprise me. Yeah, Yuri's bringing up a good point that Indians got a ton of reservations in the U.S. and Black people got affirmative action. So there's certainly measures taken to reprimand it, but it's not. That's different from saying needing to. There was never this time in U.S. where there was this true reckoning, and we said we need to address our history of colonialism and white supremacy. It was literally just actions being taken to help alleviate a bad situation, and I think that's going to be needed here. I don't think affirmative action is the right way to do it, but definitely policies to right the wrongs of the past. Yeah. George, you're saying I should also enter Israel politics. I don't know. I feel like you could have just as much impact from outside of the political system as within. So. Emperor Ghidorah says, does Hamas store and shoot rockets in evacuated civilian infrastructure on a regular basis? No, there's barely any rockets shot. There were 2 shot today, but that's the first 2 in months, I believe. So there's very few rockets being shot. Can you demonstrate your Hebrew? כן, אני יכול בכיף. שאלה מה אתה רוצה שאני אגיד. ואם אתה רוצה לשמוע אותי מדבר יותר עברית, אתה צריך לראות את השידור חי שלי שאני בהפגנות, כי אז אני מדבר ורב עם המשטרה, בעברית כמובן. Gotcha. People tell me I have a cute accent. And for whoever doesn't know what I said, sure, but what do you want me to say? If you want to hear my Hebrew more, you should watch my live streams when I'm at the protest, so you can watch me speaking and fighting with the cops in Hebrew. Dave Pendray says, what do you think of the report I send you? Where'd you send it? Did I watch Stitzel? No, I didn't, but I heard it's very good. That's like a Netflix show about an ultra-Orthodox community. Mokied says, I'm talking gibberish. Don't believe him. Damn, I was hoping no Hebrew speaker would know that. Good to see you here, Mokied. Emperor Ghidorah says, Israelis using Palestinians to investigate buildings has been widely reported for a while. I read about it almost a year ago. Yep, I think, yeah, that sounds about right. Oh, David, you sent me something on Telegram. That was so long ago. Damn, I think I probably forgot. Was this the Begin Sadat Center one? Yeah, that's a bunch of crap, the Begin Sadat report. It seems high level. Now, here's the thing. Admittedly, there's a lot of stuff there that I can't know if it's true or not without doing proper research. But I went straight to the part about the Gaza death toll, which is something that I've already researched, and it was very poorly done. And then a good friend of mine who has a very broad knowledge on many issues, he took a look at it and started telling me all these other things from different sections that were just complete crap. So it's not, it's not yeah. Don't take the Begin Sadat report seriously. It's crap. That doesn't mean there's nothing good there. There certainly might be some relevant things there, but taking it as like an authoritative piece, steer clear. Steer clear. What nonsense says your Hebrew has more Arabic tonal sounds than the Germanic origins of modern Hebrew? I don't know if that's true. Are you a Hebrew speaker? I would say my Hebrew has some slight accent that's reminiscent of an American accent, but not quite. I don't have a traditional American accent. But I don't know if Arabic. My Arabic accent's getting better because now that I'm in the North, I'm learning more Arabic, and 50% of the population up here are Arab speakers, whether they're Druze, Arab Israelis, or Palestinian citizens of Israel. So Emperor Ghidorah, this is a good question, and I actually don't have the full answer to. How widely did Hamas store and shoot rockets from civilian infrastructure before October 7th? So when it comes to storing, we should still assume that it's overwhelmingly going to be underground because it's safer there. Now, a lot of it is shot. We've seen that it's shot from areas of like fields and where there's trees and stuff. But I think it's fair to assume that some amount of the rockets are shot from areas that are relatively populated. Some amount, but I can't tell you the full extent because I never did a full deep dive into that. It's less Hamas and more Hama. Yeah, the Arabic is tough. What word do I know that says that? Yeah, when you say goodnight, you say tisbah ala khair. Tisbah ala khair. Which means may you awake with beauty or something like that. There's something beautiful and poetic about that. Adar Weiner, why are you taking questions from a known terrorist who leveled cities and invaded Earth from an alien planet? Who are you talking about? Is this somebody's name? Oh, is that Emperor Ghidorah? Okay, I've always wondered what Emperor Ghidorah is. So I guess it's some character. Okay. Problem solved. So David Pendray, about the report I was telling you about. So I didn't thoroughly debunk it, but I'm just telling you my honest assessment on the part I read was not high quality, and a friend who I really trust clearly broke down some other points there that were also just not high quality. And he suggested that I even invite the guy who wrote it on to discuss or debate. I haven't reached out to him yet. It's just it would require a lot of research for me to fully understand every section and what he did wrong there, and I just don't have time to do that right now. Remember when Jonathan Conricus pointed to guns behind an MRI machine saying, look, they stored guns in an active hospital? Yeah, I mean, Conricus is also, he confirmed in quotations the beheaded babies, not 40 beheaded babies, but he said in two separate interviews at this time we can confirm that babies have been beheaded, which we know isn't true. And yeah, you can't put metal behind an MRI machine, so that's an interesting one. But is it possible that they just stashed them there last minute? I don't know, but that whole story was silly. None of that story really made sense. They have this huge command center, and then they found, I think it was a total of 10 weapons. Do you know the city Pekin? Yeah, where is that? That's in the area, right? I guess I don't know it well enough. All right, should we review this? Somebody wanted me to review the Coleman Hughes. Anika wanted me to review the Coleman Hughes video from a month ago. I guess it's a little old by now, but we could review it. Where is it? My thoughts on what's happening in Gaza 1 month ago, 17 minutes. Okay, we'll give it a quick look. Emperor Ghidorah says, if you research how Hamas stored rockets prior to October 7th, I hope you talk about it in a separate video. Yeah, I could look into it. All the research that I've pretty much done on Hamas and Gaza and stuff has been post October 7th. Before that, I was doing Israel-Palestine commentary, reconciliation stuff, but the research stuff only happened after, once I understood how much misinformation is coming out. I said, you know what, I'm going to deep dive into this. And I have friends in certain places with a lot of knowledge, inside knowledge and information that have helped me better understand this. So it wasn't just me sitting there doing research on my own, people close to me who are ex-intelligence and stuff like that helped me better understand what's going on. So I'm not really as smart as people think. I've just been lucky. Okay. Let's do this.
In Gaza. This is a difficult topic, and there's no way to say anything meaningful about it without offending people. But I think it's important to discuss nonetheless.
True.
As I've said on this show and on a few of my Joe Rogan appearances over the past few years, I believe that in the war between Israel and Hamas, the Israelis are the good guys and Hamas are the bad guys. That may seem like a cartoonish way to describe the situation, or
it's definitely a cartoonish way to describe it, but let's continue.
or it might seem like an obscene opinion given the images of emaciated children that you've probably seen over the past few weeks, but it's still the truth. And it's a truth that's incredibly easy to lose sight of amid the day-to-day coverage of this war. In my view, the deepest tragedy in the war right now is that both sides have committed war crimes, and in both cases, those war crimes are falling on Palestinian civilians. The truth, of course, is that every war features war crimes, but usually each army commits those crimes against the enemy's population. In this case, the Palestinians of Gaza have received a double dose of the excesses of each side. But here's the crucial point. That doesn't make both sides morally equal. Let me begin by making something clear. When I say that the Israelis are the good guys in this war, I'm not saying that everything the IDF does is justifiable, far from it. And I'm not saying that Israeli soldiers haven't committed war crimes. Certainly they have. What I mean is that Israel's goals as a country are far more benign and ethical than Hamas's goals. Israel's goal is to live in peace with its neighbors. Now, you can focus on the far-right faction within Israel that wants more than that, but it's just that. It's one faction within a democracy, no more representative of the will of Israelis than AOC or Marjorie Taylor Greene represents the will of Americans.
So there's actually a fair bit of truth to this, and I know this is controversial. If Israel didn't face any threat from their neighbors and no threat from Palestinians, then they wouldn't just be invading countries for the sake of it. That's true. But what's also true is that there have always been expansionist elements within Israeli society that have taken advantage of violence from our neighbors to achieve their expansionist goals. Now, it's also not so simple to say, okay, well, Israel just wants to live in peace while they don't, because once you have the upper hand and once you gain your territory and your sovereignty, you're more likely to be okay with the situation than the people who you displaced and took their land from, right? So let's just take some other historical examples. You could make the case that, and this isn't a perfect example, but let's say when the early Europeans arrived to the Americas, they weren't just, it's true that in reality their goal was to continue taking all the Americas, but let's say they just said, you know what, we're just going to take the whole coastline. That's it, we're done. We want peace, guys. We want peace. And then the Native Americans would be like, no, what do you mean peace? You just took our entire coastline. There's no peace. And then Coleman Hughes of the 1400s would say, or the early 1500s would say, between the Native Americans and Israel and the colonies, one just wants to live in peace while the other wants to destroy those colonies, right? When you look at it in that way, it's kind of a ridiculous way to look at it. So it is true that Israel does not want to keep conquering land and doesn't want to kill for the sake of killing. Israel does want peace on their terms. But it makes sense why the population that got 70% of the land they were historically living on taken from them, and with more and more expansion in the whatever small amount of land they have left, why they're not okay with Israel just wanting peace. So that framing is just problematic. It misses an important nuance. Anyways, let's continue.
By and large, Israelis don't want to conquer Gaza. In fact, they left Gaza voluntarily in 2005, and they don't want to wipe Gaza off the map. If they wanted that, they could have done it any time in the last several decades. With their advantage in firepower.
No, again, so that's false. They could have done it. No. Being able to technically do it and having the military means to do it doesn't mean it's politically feasible. Doesn't mean the world will let you do it. So to say if they wanted to, they would have, that's not true. That's not true. Many Israelis, especially now, would want to destroy all of Gaza, but we can't. We're not allowed to. The world won't let us.
They could do it now in a matter of weeks. And you should ask yourself why they don't. Hamas, on the other hand.
Yeah, that's a dumb argument. Why they can't. He's saying the reason, or why they don't. He's implying that the reason why Israel isn't just getting rid of all Gazans is out of the kindness of their heart. But could you imagine if the world wasn't paying attention and nobody cared about what happened to Gaza, would there still be a Gaza left? Would there still be Gazans in Gaza? I don't think so. So to frame this as the reason they're doing it is because we're being virtuous or kind, no, man. No, man, I don't buy that.
Does want to conquer Israel and wipe it off the map. And they would be happy to do what they did on October 7th to the entire country. That's what I mean when I say that the two sides in this war are not the same. There's a huge moral asymmetry between them, and that matters.
That's another thing. The whole thing of trying to compare morality between people in very different circumstances, there's no good way to do a comparison. Your moral outlook on life, the military tactics you're going to use are very much dependent on how much power you have. Who's more immoral? A criminal who murders somebody, or a police officer who, I don't know if there's a great analogy, but a criminal that kills one person intentionally cold blank, right? They murder somebody. Like there was this story this week that the video of the black man stabbing the Ukrainian refugee on the bus. That was fucked up. So that guy, right? He should be locked up, obviously. What he did is horrific. Let's say you have a situation where a cop is doing a traffic stop and they feel threatened, and then they just open fire and kill 4 kids in the car unnecessarily. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't as brutal. It was a mistake. Who's morally worse? Now, again, it's just an analogy to try to show that it's not all about intention. It's not all about the brutality of what you do. How you act, how you behave is very much dependent on the amount of power you have. So this whole moral comparisons, they're nearly impossible to do because we're talking about completely different situations. I don't see any value in trying to do the moral comparison. But if you want to, what's morally worse? Killing 850 civilians or going on 100,000 civilians? What's worse, killing 38 children or killing 20,000 children? Right? Like, so no, I don't accept this framing.
The point I'm making here is right on the surface of how we look at most wars in history. It's possible to agree with the goals of an army, but condemn its methods. In fact, it's not just possible, it's actually most people's default view of most wars, including just wars. Many people take that attitude towards dropping atomic bombs on Japan, for instance. Or when you learn about the Union Army burning down 40% of Atlanta, including civilian homes during the Civil War, most of us respond by thinking, wow, that was terrible, and some of it must have been unnecessary, but the North was still the good guy in that war. Why were they the good guys? Not because they were the underdogs. In fact, they weren't. Not because they suffered more war crimes. In fact, the South almost certainly suffered more war crimes, but because their goals were more benign. The South was fighting to preserve slavery, and the North was fighting to end it. If not at the beginning of the war, then certainly by the end. In other words, the goals that each side is fighting for matter a great deal. That's not to say that goals are the only things that matter. How armies conduct themselves matters too. And it's very easy to find examples of IDF soldiers conducting themselves terribly. Each example of this should be reported on and exposed.
So again, there's definitely something legitimate in saying it's not just about how a war is conducted, but the goal. I agree, but Gaza, Hamas, Israel is not comparable to these other examples he gave, because I'm not an expert in the Civil War, and I'm not even convinced that war had to be fought, honestly. But I don't want to speak from a place of ignorance, but I'm not sure that war had to be fought, even if the North was the good guys because they wanted to free the slaves. I've heard that the motivation was the war was to keep the U.S. whole, but I'm still not convinced the amount of death that war led to was actually worth it. And I don't think there would still be slavery in the South had that war not been fought, because where in the West is there slavery today? So, but that's almost a side note. But if you're gonna engage in a war that's going to kill a lot of people, you should only do that if you don't have other alternatives, or if you have no better alternatives. So a lot of people like to bring up the Nazi example. Okay, well, the alternatives to not defeating Hitler was almost certainly worse than the cost of trying to defeat him. The cost in not fighting Hamas the way we're fighting them is almost certainly less than the cost of doing what we're doing. So this is part of the moral calculation we need to take. What is the cost, and what are our alternative options? Hamas does not pose nearly the same threat as Hitler did. Hamas, on their most successful day in history, and it was so successful because Israel massively fucked up, killed 850 civilians, 1,200 people total. That's their most successful day in history. And I don't want to minimize it. That was horrific. But this is not like saying these are the Nazis that need to be defeated. It's just not. These are not comparable things.
And those responsible held to account. However, it's also true that this is to be expected in any war. If 1% of all human beings are sociopaths, and just humor me with that assumption for a moment, if 1% of all people are sociopaths, then out of 500,000 or so Israeli soldiers that have served in Gaza, you'd expect 5,000 of them to be maniacs. And that would be true in any war. How much damage could 5,000 heartless soldiers do over the course of a year and a half? How many war crimes could they commit against innocent Palestinians? And how much bad PR could they generate for Israel? Yet that's what we'd expect to see, even if the IDF were doing everything right. But
so, okay, again, it's true. Although a sociopath does not mean that you're sadistic by default. So, but I get what he's saying, right? No matter what, you're going to have some amount, and people will be outraged. In Gaza, the situation is quite a bit different, right? So, first of all, it's not a problem of a 1%. The majority of the Israeli population believe there are no innocents in Gaza. The majority. There's also a very low level of internal regulation. The IDF is highly revered. It's the most revered institution in Israeli society. There's a social and political cost to holding soldiers accountable. So if you have a situation where some percent, or even if it's just some percent, are sociopaths, the solution is a high level of accountability. If a war crime's committed, they're charged with the crime. Now, this isn't a problem only Israel faces. Militaries generally don't charge their own at such a high rate, okay? So this isn't only a problem Israel has. When you have a situation where the majority of the population that's currently fighting in Gaza believe there are no innocents there, and there's a low level of accountability, all you need to, if you knew nothing else about Gaza, and that's all you knew, you would expect an abundance and excess of war crimes that is unacceptable. And that very much maps the reality we are currently seeing. Anyways, let's continue.
Is the IDF doing everything right? Absolutely not. For one thing, the choice to cut off all humanitarian aid to Gaza for over 2 months earlier this year in order to pressure Hamas to release the hostages was, in my view, a mistake and arguably a war crime. Hamas has stolen enough aid to survive in its tunnels for a prolonged period. We know that. And they're completely unaffected by the suffering of their own people. We know that too. You can add to this the failed experiment in aid distribution that's been going on since May. IDF soldiers using live rounds for crowd control, which is to say shooting above people's heads to disperse crowds. But there are also credible reports of soldiers shooting civilians who were trying to get food and accidentally go into a prohibited zone. Now, some of these are tragic accidents and some are doubtless war crimes. But again, it's worth lingering over the asymmetry of war crimes even here. When an IDF soldier goes berserk, he commits a war crime. But every time a Hamas fighter shoots a bullet without wearing a uniform, it's a war crime. Hamas's entire MO is one big war crime. And unlike most wars, where each side is committing crimes against enemy civilians, in this case, almost all of the excess.
Okay, I mean, Hamas should be uniformed, and sometimes they are. When they pop out of the tunnel and go back in, they're generally not. But recently, when they did their big attack on a unit, which was a failure, they didn't succeed in the attack. But this was like 2 weeks ago. Remember, it was like for 12 hours, they thought maybe soldiers got kidnapped. They were all uniformed then. But there's a different extent of war crime. Shooting a soldier while you're not on a uniform is not the same war crime as sending an elderly man into potentially booby-trapped buildings as a human shield, or shooting a woman or a child in a no-go zone, or destroying a home with an entire family in it because Hamas might be in a tunnel underneath. So you can't just use war crime as this general term and put them all equal. These are not the same thing. And it's worth mentioning, Israel has a whole unit of people who don't wear uniforms. That's the point of the unit. They go in pretending like they dress as Palestinians, they speak Arabic, and then they'll sometimes assassinate people. So we do that too. But the main point is that that's not the same extent of war crime. It's just not. And also, I think that it's also important to recognize that nobody should be committing war crimes, but the more power one side has, the graver them committing war crimes it is. With power comes responsibility. And the reason is simple, because irresponsible power is much more dangerous than irresponsibility of someone weak. So Hamas has a fraction of the military capabilities as Israel. So they're looking for any advantage they could get over Israel, the same way Israel is being risk averse and trying to get any advantage over Hamas. So one of the advantages Hamas takes is not wearing uniforms. And again, that's illegal under international law, but that's not the same as the war crimes we're seeing Israel commit, right? So trying to equate these as the same is kind of silly.
Both of the IDF and of Hamas fall on Palestinian civilians. But whose fault is that? Is it Israel's fault that its own civilians are incredibly well protected by defensive infrastructure like the Iron Dome and bomb shelters? Is it Israel's fault that Hamas has built one of the most extensive networks of underground bomb shelters in the history of warfare, but doesn't allow its own civilians to enter them? Is it Israel's fault that Hamas uses children as lookouts, thereby turning them into combatants under the international laws of war? Because when we hold Israel alone responsible for the civilian death toll in Gaza,
I'm not sure a lookout is a combatant under international humanitarian law. Maybe someone could look that up in the meantime, but I don't think that doesn't sound right.
Toll that results directly from Hamas's barbaric style of warfare, we are implicitly holding Israel responsible for Hamas's war crimes against the Palestinians. Now, it's incredibly easy to lose sight of this, given the mainstream media bias on the topic. For instance, the New York Times released a story on July 24th entitled, "Gazans are dying of starvation." The article relied on testimony from several doctors working in Gaza, as well as the Gaza Health Ministry, and it used that to build a case that deaths from starvation are on the rise. In the article, there was one photo that stood out. It was a photo of a mother holding an emaciated skeletal infant named Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawak. This photo was displayed prominently on the front page of the physical edition of the New York Times and made the rounds on social media. You almost certainly saw it. And importantly, it was the only photo in the article that clearly suggested starvation as opposed to chaotic, hungry refugees. And it wasn't long before sleuths on X discovered that there was another photo, which the Times chose to omit, of the boy and his mother next to his 3-year-old brother, who clearly isn't starving. So if there's no food, why is the 3-year-old not also thin? It turns out this young boy didn't look emaciated because of starvation conditions. In fact, he was born with serious disease, perhaps cerebral palsy or hypoxia. It's not yet clear. But 6 days after the article came out, the New York Times had to issue a correction, noting that the boy was born with unrelated health issues that account for his skeletal appearance. Now, if such crucial information could be left out of the original article, what other information was left out? Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying there isn't hunger or food insecurity or humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Of course there is. What I'm saying is that the pipeline that's feeding you information about the humanitarian disaster in Gaza is fundamentally broken, biased, untrustworthy, and weaponized against Israel. Now, think about what had to happen for the New York Times to publish.
I mean, Israel could solve this by letting more journalists in. That's one way they could solve it. And it's true. I mean, you definitely have an information problem, and media has not been responsible. But I would argue that they've probably been less responsible in the other direction. For example, the fact. We'll put it this way: the charitability Israel gets, and the language that's used in how Israel conducts itself, and the fact that Israel could kill so many civilians. Had those roles been reversed, the language the media would be using about Hamas killing similar levels of civilians would be vastly different. But it's true that you can't get there's an information problem. I don't entirely disagree with that. Okay.
the information that this particular child was born with serious disease. Journalists had to talk to the child's mother and doctor, who presumably withheld this crucial detail, and the claims had to survive fact-checking without anyone at the Times pointing out how strange it was to see one child emaciated and his brother right next to him looking fine. And then after the Twitter sleuths got to the story, they had to call this doctor again and ask him, hey, did you by chance leave out the fact that this particular baby looks the way he does because he has a disease unrelated to this war? And then you have to wonder, because the entire story is based on the testimony of similarly placed doctors, how many of the doctors in Gaza, who are generally not neutral about the two sides in this war, how many of those doctors who talk to Western journalists are making similar omissions? And if they are, how would we even know? As for the Gaza Health Ministry, which is a part of Hamas's political infrastructure, it's very difficult to trust their reports as well. I mean, on one level, they're the only real source of information about what's happening in Gaza, so you can't just discount them blindly. But nor can you trust them blindly. Recall that when there was an explosion at a hospital early on in the war, the same Gaza Health Ministry reported within minutes that exactly 471 people had been killed by an Israeli bomb that hit the hospital. And the New York Times reported this uncritically. Well, it turns out the true death count was less than half that number. The hospital itself wasn't even hit. It was the parking lot next to the hospital. And oh yeah, it wasn't an Israeli bomb. It was actually a Palestinian.
Yeah, I'm not fully convinced of it was an Islamic Jihad rocket. I know that's the narrative now, that they got it wrong and this is what it was. I don't think it's very much not obviously. It's very much not obvious that that's what happened. Anybody who says, yeah, we now know that it was definitely an Islamic Jihad rocket, I don't see how you could know that with confidence. In fact, the explosion that you see there looks awfully similar to airstrike explosions. So anybody who's confident about this is just deciding based on what side they want to believe here. Anyways, just continue.
Jihad rocket. So one has to be skeptical about how the Gaza Health Ministry arrives at its confident conclusions, and one has to understand that their incentive is to exaggerate as much as they can get away with. And the less skeptical that we are as Western journalists, the more they can exaggerate without penalty. Again, the information pipeline here is just fundamentally broken.
I think that's a good point, actually. Now, what he says is what they could get away with, and that's why we need to rely on the fatality list they released, because that's not something they could get away with fabricating or lying because of its verifiable nature. So, and I talk about this all the time. If the Ministry of Health will just make a claim, that should be looked at with skepticism. But when they release the fatality lists with the names and ID numbers, that could and should be relied on.
Finally, I want to discuss the charge of genocide, because this is one of the most serious charges made against Israel. It's also, in my view, one of the most absurd. Genocide is the physical destruction, not the metaphorical destruction, not the destruction of property, but the physical destruction of a people in whole or in part. Israel's aim in Gaza is not to destroy the Palestinian people as a whole, nor to destroy Gazan Palestinians in particular. How do we know this? Because even if we accept the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers at face value, that is 60,000 people killed in Gaza in about 22 months of war. That is 3% of Gaza's population. You could argue that it's more than 60,000 dead because there are uncounted bodies tragically trapped under the rubble. But on the other hand, you'd have to subtract the combatants from that number as well, and the IDF says that about 20,000 combatants have been killed. To be clear, my default assumption is that both sides in any war are exaggerating their numbers. But for the sake of argument and fairness, let's just take both sides.
They're not exaggerating. It's an undercount. It's definitely an undercount.
At their word.
We know it's an undercount, and we also know that indirect deaths aren't included.
For a moment. So 60,000 dead, 20,000 of whom are combatants.
No.
That's about
I knew he was going to say this bullshit argument. Bro, at least do some basic research. We have the names and ID numbers of these 60,000. We know that. Let me pull it up. I mean, we know that there's not 20,000 combatants on the list. We know this for certain. There's not even a question. My analysis is coming out in the next few days. I know I've been saying this for a while, but I'm doing an updated analysis on this. Here we go. Boop. We have all the names and ID numbers. Okay. I'm crunching some numbers here, but you can see every name, every ID number. You can see how many men, women, and children. Okay. The entire, there's 26,000 men on the list, 9,000 women. Actually, it's going to be hard to show it there, but we know that there's not 20,000. You can't do 60,000 minus 20,000. There's absolutely zero reason to do that. I'll pull up another chart to show you why. But the data's all here, so he has no excuse to make this bullshit claim. I mean, he has an excuse. People make the claim, and he just didn't look at it critically. But it's a ridiculous claim. There's zero basis to it. Anyone doing 60,000 minus 20,000, that's not serious. And yeah. Call them out on that immediately. There's not 20,000 combatants on the list. There might be it's plausible that there's quite a few combatants not on the list, but you can't do 20,000, 60,000 minus 20,000. You just can't. Here's the chart. Okay. Why is this? Okay. Females, males. This red line is establishing the baseline between males and females. Everything above the red line is excess male deaths. We see that excess male deaths happen in all ages, not just combatant ages. Combatant ages is what's darker blue. If we look at the average rate at which non-combatant males are being killed at a higher rate than females, they're dying at a 63% higher rate. So this yellow line establishes the baseline of what can potentially be combatant deaths. Everything above the blue line might be combatants. Now, why do males die at a higher rate? They take more risks, like getting food, water, and aid. They're more confused for being combatants, and they're more likely to work in dangerous positions like first responders, journalists, etc. Now, while this establishes the baseline, there's only everything above the yellow line is 17%. But the same reasons why males of all these ages are dying at a high rate, that's even more true of military-age males. Military-age civilians are more likely to be confused with being combatants, more likely to take risks, and more likely to work in dangerous positions. So it's not 17%. It's less than 17%. This list is probably anywhere from 15% to like 1% combatants. There's not 20,000. There's anywhere from around 9,000 combatants here to just a few hundred. Now, this doesn't mean that only a few hundred combatants have been killed. These are confirmed deaths that are being reported on. This is all ID numbers that exist in the Palestinian Population Registry, which Israel can verify. We know from whistleblowers that Israel relies on this data. They confirm that they looked into it and that it's reliable. But the Ministry of Health might be omitting combatants being killed. So even if this list is 99% civilians, which it might be, right? That's within the range. That doesn't mean that the civilian to combatant ratio is 99-1, but it just means that any attempt to do this 60,000 minus 20,000 is bullshit. It should not be taken seriously. There's no reason to try to analyze it this way. None whatsoever. And in a few days, I'm going to release my new analysis going into all of this and how we can estimate percentages of civilians killed, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get this back. Share screen. Dun.
3% of Gaza's pre-war population killed in 22 months of war. Now, critics of Israel are fond of pointing out just how big the power disparity between Israel and the Palestinians is. And they are completely correct. Israel can do just about anything it wants. If the IDF chose to destroy Gazans as a people, they could kill almost everyone in Gaza in a matter of weeks. So ask yourself, why haven't they? And if your answer is international pressure, meaning they really would like to commit a genocide, except they don't want to become a pariah state like North Korea, well, then you've already conceded that they're not, in fact, committing a genocide. What you're accusing them of in that case is harboring secret wishes that they're not acting on. So we can have that conversation, but that's separate from an accusation of genocide.
Okay, what if Israel, their goal were to commit genocide while maintaining plausible deniability? What would that look like? How would that look different than what they're currently doing? That's a question that he needs to answer. So genocide does not mean killing as many people as possible as quickly as possible. That's not what it means. So if you're trying to destroy a population in whole or in part, and Israel, you could see a clear incentive for Israel to want to destroy the means of life in Gaza and kill some amount of the civilian population, just because it will help them voluntarily relocate Gazans. So there is an incentive there for them to want to do this. But if they were to want to do this while maintaining plausible deniability, it would look awfully similar, if not identical, to what we're currently seeing. Let's continue.
The Nazis killed 60% of European Jews. The Turks killed over 50% of Armenians. In Rwanda, something like 80% of Tutsis were killed in 100 days. Those were genocides. And in legitimate cases of genocide, in which...
Why didn't he include Bosnia, where only 6,000 men were killed, and that was considered or primarily men were killed, and that was considered a genocide? That's a convenient omission.
A smaller percentage of people were killed. It was because the genocidaire didn't have...
Oh, wait. Is that what he just said?
And in legitimate cases of genocide, in which a smaller killed and other killed, it was because the genocidaire didn't have the ability to kill more. Now, we know that Israel could easily kill 50% or 60 or 80% of Gazans in less than 100 days if they wanted to, but they don't. And that's really all you need to know to be sure that Israel isn't committing genocide.
No, I'm sorry, that's a weak argument. For a smart dude, that's dumb. Just got to put that out there.
The focus on what an Israeli defense minister said in his angriest moment after October 7th, or some truly awful comment made about Palestinians by a far-right minister, this focus is understandable, but it's actually misplaced. The reason we focus on what politicians say is to divine their intentions from unclear information, right? We're trying to understand what they would do if they had the power to do it. But in the case of Israel and Gaza, we don't have to divine their intentions because they're so powerful, they can already do whatever they want. Now, that said, if you do want to get into the weeds about what Israeli decision makers have actually said, as opposed to what propagandists claim that they've said, then you should read the Atlantic article by Yair Rosenberg called "What Did Top Israeli War Officials Really Say About Gaza?" For instance, one of the...
It's true that there's been some misinformation about that.
Most frequently circulated quotes, including in the New York Times, the BBC, the NPR, and the Guardian, was literally fabricated. It was a fake quote. And many others were deliberately taken out of context. So check out that article if you want more. But again, all of this is a little bit beside the point because the IDF is so powerful that the best indication of what Israeli decision makers are trying to do in Gaza isn't a cherry-picked quote by a minister. The best indication is what they're actually doing. And what they're actually doing is trying to destroy Hamas, an organization that started a war against them and is fanatically committed to their destruction. So there's more I could talk about, but in the interest of brevity, I'll leave it here. Whether or not you agree with everything I've said, hopefully you find something I've said useful. See you next time on Conversations with Coleman.
Yeah, that was weak. I mean, I liked a lot of what Coleman would say in the past. I think a lot of his vision for race-related stuff has merit. But this was weak. This was weak. Some good points, I guess, but I expected more Coleman. I expected more. We should try to get him on for a stream, huh? I don't know if he would join, but that'd be a good one. Okay, we'll do a little bit more Q&A and then Mo Kid is saying, why would they do a genocide with plausible deniability? You can't relocate Gazans to any other country practically. Well, but Israel's been trying. Israel's talking to all sorts of countries around the world. They've been trying to get them to Egypt. They're talking to countries in Africa and in Asia. There was a white paper to relocate Gazans as early as October 8th that circulated. That was put out by a Knesset member. It's the publicly stated plan of both Trump and Netanyahu, not on one occasion. You could say it's not their only plan, right? So there's a few options, right? It's not like Israel's only intention is to relocate Gazans. But if they could, they would. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't Netanyahu do that? Wouldn't that be the best success he could get? The best way to win over the people after his failure of October 7th? If he could, he would. So he's trying to. But if he can't, then there's other options, right? Have Hamas surrender and disarm. That'd be a great win as well. He's trying to do that also. Those are probably his two. That's plan A, plan B. Everything else would be seen as a failure, right? But I don't think we should, you say it's a fantasy. It might be practically speaking a fantasy, but it's still an intention that, if possible, could be achieved. And when you look at the strategy of really systematically destroying Gaza, making it unlivable, it aligns with the vision. Yeah, Mokid, you're saying they can. That's my point. But they're trying. So it's not that the chance of them succeeding is zero. You could say it's low chance, but there's an active attempt. They're talking to other countries about this. There's been a few countries that they've tried to convince. Just hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it doesn't. But it's not like if the reason it's not happening is not because Israel doesn't want to do it. It's just they haven't been able to figure out the logistics of doing so. So Mokid, you're saying they're not trying, they're talking hot air for internal political purposes. I don't buy that. I mean, it's possible, but how can you say that with confidence, especially when Netanyahu is saying it in English, in English interviews, Trump saying it. He's not just saying this in Hebrew. Isaac says, Adar, you many times said you don't like the word Zionism because it's not defined well enough, but you use the word justice, which is not clear at all. Some say it just means anti-Zionism. Some say it's. Let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, justice, like many other words, are not clearly defined, but Zionism is in a different category because the two competing sides have very different definitions of it, A, and B, it provides no utility whatsoever. Justice is a word that actually means something. Zionism means this Jewish self-determination. Great. Say Jewish self-determination. Why does that need a special word? But, so justice actually has a meaning and provides utility when you use it. If you can think of another way to describe that, then I'm open to adopting that language. And when I reflect on it, I don't know how often I use justice. I say a just solution, right? So that's a solution that both sides would perceive as fair. And I'll say Palestinians, what's important to them is justice, right? So a feeling like the wrong was righted. That's generally how I use it. But if you have a suggestion, I'm happy to hear. Mokid says, yeah, but you can say the reason every Jew in Israel hasn't been massacred is because Palestinians aren't able to. No, actually, I don't accept that. That again comes down to when you don't have power, you are more likely to engage in seemingly barbaric acts. If Hamas had all the power and Israel didn't, then they would rely on different means. And we have some signs of this. They did a conference. The last time they did it was 2021. They did a conference, and you could say that they're not serious about this, but it was a Hamas conference with other Muslim Brotherhood leaders and whatnot, and other terror organizations. And they discussed the day after. What do we do the day after we conquer the land? They actually laid out a plan. Killing all Jews was not part of the plan. They said they'll kill soldiers, yeah, and they'll expel everyone else, and then keep keep scientists as to not allow for brain drain. Now, that's not good. Obviously, that's not something we should allow to happen. But their publicly stated day after plan is not kill everybody living here. Because once you have power, you start to look at things differently. And then Nikia says, just look at Irgun and Stern gangs. Exactly. We used to be terror. We used to be terror groups that intentionally attacked civilians, Palestinian civilians, until we had power. And now we can do it with plausible deniability, or not directly try to target them, but just have a callous indifference towards them. Now, Mokid, you're saying the Nazis didn't have power. No, they did, but you're talking about something very specific. That's not to think that a resistance group that is born out of oppression is something very common. We have a lot of historical examples of such resistance groups born out of oppression. That's not the same as Nazism and their ideology and how they view the world, which is very much an outlier. That's very rare and unique, and almost like a standalone case. So I don't think we should just assume that's what's going to happen. And had they had, and actually I see we have Irina here in Discord. She actually wrote this as a comment, and I thought it was a good comment. This was in reference to my debate with Zach, but he said something similar. He said, if Hamas could kill more people on October 7th, how many would they kill? But I don't think it's the right hypothetical question. And then Irina wrote a comment, which I thought was very intelligent. She said, if Hamas had greater military capabilities, they wouldn't just go to the kibbutzim and massacre people in the kibbutzim. They would go deeper into Israel and just take more military bases. Right? Had they had more power and a greater ability to go deeper, there's very little tactical advantage to the kibbutzim unless that's all you could do. Okay, so you're going to commit a massacre. But if you have a true military and you could go deeper, start taking over every single military base, take over government buildings. That's the way to collapse the country. But because they didn't have power, they just went to the nearest towns and did whatever they could. So I don't think that's the right way to look at it. So thank you, Irina, for giving me that little example, because I think it's a good one. Now, what's interesting is, let's say that none of what Israel's doing comes from a place of wanting to ethnically cleanse Gazans, right? Mokid, let's say that you're right, and they're just doing that for political purposes. And the massive destruction we're seeing in Gaza is not as a means to ethnically cleanse. It's just a very low level of protection for civilians. If we kill one combatant and 20 civilians, so be it, right? Let's say it's that mentality thousands of times over. Would that then be a genocide? I think there's much. If you could know that their intention is not to ethnically cleanse Gaza, I think there's a much more interesting debate over if that constitutes Gaza or just an abundance of war crimes. But also, there's been the systematic destruction of the water systems in Gaza, the severe diminishing of the healthcare's capacity, just leveling neighborhood after neighborhood very systematically. This is destroying population's means to live. So, and I'm sure those, our consistent viewers know this, but I don't use the term genocide often. It's similar to my logic behind Zionism and why I don't use the term Zionist or anti-Zionist, but I don't care for the debate on terminology. I think it's a distraction and a waste of time. And so I'd rather just describe the reality as I see it and the moral implications of such a reality. I think that's a better way to describe what's happening in Gaza than using the G word. And also, for Jews, our frame of reference for genocide is the Holocaust. So we find that term deeply triggering, and it shuts fellow Jews, it shuts them down to otherwise productive conversation. And that is one of my primary goal is to have productive conversations. So I would rather just not use the term and just describe the reality of what I see. So I don't have any objection to usage of the term genocide. I think it'll be remembered as a genocide. And I think it's good to use harsh language to describe the harsh reality we're seeing. But I generally describe it as the mass killing of civilians, something that's morally indefensible, one of the worst atrocities of the 21st century. That's generally how I talk about this. So Isaac says, I think that most Israelis think the Palestinian justice just means undo the injustice of creating a Jewish majority state. When used this, we give a good word a very bad interpretation. Yeah, I would agree with I agree with that when Israelis hear justice in the context of Israel-Palestine, they think it's the dismantling or destruction of Israel. I think that's fair to say. So Mokia, you say, I don't accept these phrasings as well. And that's fine and all, but it's a much more interesting and productive debate. If I say this is morally indefensible and you say it is morally defensible, great. Let's debate that. But if I say it's genocide and you say it's not genocide, then we're getting into terminology and semantics and law. That's a less interesting conversation, in my opinion. So, great. Yeah, so Irina says, they actually proved to be a really weak and undisciplined military organization that succeeded more than expected and had zero plan or idea how to leverage it further. Taking peace activist grandma hostage is counterproductive and a liability. And to prove the above, they couldn't wait to get rid of this kind of hostages as quickly as possible and for very little cost from Israel. Right. There's also reports that something similar about B-Bus, that Hamas called the organization that took B-Bus and was furious that they did that. And this isn't confirmed, but I saw there's some report that there was some fighting between them because they took the Bebas children. But yeah, that makes sense. Dami says, regarding this argument, the Nazis also planned first to ethnically cleanse Jews, but when they were not able to, they attempted to exterminate them. That's also an argument from Omer Bartov that there's a genocide in Gaza because Israel can't ethnically cleanse them right now. Okay. What's that noise in the background? It might be the washing machine. Can you really hear that? Damn. Well, I think the cycle's ending. So sorry about that. We have a comment from X. I can't read your name, sorry, because it's in Arabic. Hey, I just found your account and I like your thoughts. For context, I'm Palestinian American. Both parents are Palestinian. I have family in the West Bank, and they say everyone would accept Israeli citizen if offered. Is that something that can happen to both people in the West Bank and Gaza? Highly implausible. I mentioned this a bit earlier. First of all, I'm glad to have a new viewer. Welcome to the stream. The reason it's highly implausible is because that would create a very serious demographic concern for Jewish Israelis. That would make Jewish Israelis around 50% of the population. And I think it's a legitimate concern. When you have 50-50 population, both populations with deep mistrust, fear, and hate of one another, competing over demographic and political control, that seems to be a recipe for disaster. That's something that could happen after years of peace, security, and a reconciliation process. But for that to just happen overnight, Israel would never agree to that. Israelis would never agree to that unless they're forced into. But if Israel annexes the West Bank, then what very well might happen is this national rights movement will transform into a civil rights movement. It'll kill the Palestinian state, but there'll then be a civil rights movement for citizenship and equality. And I think civil rights movements are easier than national rights movements. Maxie says if they were furious about taking Biba's children, they would release them during the first exchange. No, but it wasn't Hamas that took them. It was some like the Palestinian Mujahideen is the ones who took them. And also they were killed. I believe they were even killed before the first exchange, right around that time. But it might have been even before the first exchange. How many Israelis were killed by Israel on October 7th? This is a controversial one. It's hard to know, but I think it's a safe estimate is a few dozen to, let's say, 100. And if somebody wants to look into it enough, there's a way to come up with an assessment. You just really need to research it. So the few dozen to 100, this is primarily from Hellfire missiles and some from tank fire, maybe some from gunshots, but primarily Hellfire. Now, how do we know this? Well, first of all, we know that 12 were killed from tank fire in a house in Kibbutz Be'eri. A tank shot a home, killed all 12 people inside. The reason we actually know this is because there was a survivor that reported that that's what happened. Now, Israel admitted to using massive amounts of Hellfire missiles. This is what the helicopters shoot, massive amounts of Hellfire missiles. And imagine you have all this chaos on the ground. People are coming in from Gaza, going back to Gaza. They're going back with hostages. You don't have communication with the troops on the ground. They got overwhelmed. There's just massive firepower. The way you can estimate it is by trying to see how many bodies took a long time to identify, because the Hellfire missiles destroys your body. It burns you to a crisp and blows you up into pieces. So if we look at the dates in which bodies were finally identified, anyone who took over a few weeks, now it's possible some of them were found in a field and they were shot, right? So some amount of those identified late were found in a field, but I think it's fair to assume the majority of those that were identified late were killed from Hellfire missile, because it took a long time to be able to find DNA. If any other cause of death, you have teeth, you have DNA, you can identify. And there was quite a lot of bodies that took over a month to identify. And then, Samokid, you're saying that's not the only way to make bodies unidentifiable. Okay, tell me what weapon Hamas used that makes them unidentifiable, because I looked into this and no, bazookas, you still have teeth. But no, man, I looked into this. You could prove me wrong, but Hamas did not use weaponry that does that to bodies. Bazookas don't do this. Grenades don't do this. Even lighting people on fire doesn't do this. And here's another way. Here's another way we can know that there were a lot of burnt bodies. Now, so that's another thing. We'll often, we have the story where you see there's like an MRI where the spines of the child and the father are combined, and they say this is Hamas burning them to a crisp. That too is almost certainly a Hellfire missile. That amount of damage does not happen from gasoline. And also if you look at the wire that was binding them, it actually looks like it was something from a car. It's not binding wire. It's a very specific wire that probably is in like the seat of a car or something like that. Now, another way that we know that Israel used a lot of Hellfire missiles is because, do you remember at the beginning, initially they said 1,400 Israelis were killed, and then they revised the number to 1,200. Their explained revision was there were 200 bodies we thought were Israelis, but they ended up being Hamas. Think about what that's an admission of. That's them saying, we had these bodies burnt to a crisp, and we thought we burnt. So the only thing that could burn them to a crisp, if they're burnt Hamas bodies, who burnt them to a crisp? Obviously Israel. But Israel still assumed that that must be Israelis that they burnt to a crisp. And then it turned out it was Hamas. So Israel acknowledged to burning hundreds of Hamas bodies to a crisp beyond recognition. And these were primarily Gazans returning into Gaza, many of them with hostages. So people get very defensive over this. They're getting very defensive over this and saying, like, they get offended when we bring it up. But I mean, this is very plausible stuff. This is, again, I'm not being hyperbolic here. There's no reason to not think that some number were killed by Hellfire missile, especially with so much chaos, especially with so much firepower. And I'm even open to the case saying, you know what, maybe that's true, but it's still Hamas's fault because of the invasion, and Israel just had to try to contain it. I'm actually okay with that argument. I think that's I think that's a legitimate pushback. But if we want to be honest, yeah, some number were killed from Hellfire missile for sure. ITS is saying, and are you saying it because you were a bomb expert? No, I'm definitely not a bomb expert, but I researched for the purpose of trying to understand if there were weapons that could have done this. You need to understand the amount of heat and the level of explosion you need to bring a body to the point where A, there's no teeth, and B, it's hard to extract DNA. That's not normal weaponry. So it's not even super hard to reach that conclusion. You just need to understand the weapons. You could find photos of what these weapons look like. You could, right, because these weapons have been used in the past. So you find photos. You could also, you could see the heat that's needed. You could research the heat of these weapons. You can see the level of force needed and the level of force these weapons create. So it's not super hard to reach this conclusion. Hamas used weapons that can blow up limbs, burn bodies, but not incinerate you. They just didn't. And if somebody believes differently, I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong about this, but I haven't discovered a single weapon they use that could do that. Israeli G says they use explosive charges in masses and RPGs. It was all on display right after the attacks. Yeah, I know, but that doesn't do that to a body. There was one instance of very much charred bodies that could be attributed to Hamas, which was people hiding in an ambulance, and the ambulance was hit with an RPG, and the ambulance has both gasoline and pressurized oxygen, and that created a massive explosion, and whoever was in there, I think it was 12 people in there also. So that's one example, right? So you could have situations like that. That's the one example we know of. But when you look at the weapons they were using compared to what Israel was using, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, you know. And you need to understand, there was chaos. They lost communication with people on the ground, and used just immense firepower on the entire border, anybody crossing back. I think they even acknowledged to blowing up 60 cars. Okay, some of those cars had hostages in them. What's the chances that those cars didn't have hostages, right? So I don't think, you know, I don't even see why this should be controversial. It's not even something that, I don't even think that's so bad, honestly. Like, what Israel's doing in Gaza, I think, is worse than losing control of the situation, using heavy firepower to control a situation, and killing your own accidentally. Like, I don't think that's that horrific. So I guess I see why people don't like it, because it's made to like minimize what Hamas did, and you're blaming the deaths on Israel. But just say it's like, yeah, okay, so Israel killed civilians, their own civilians, accidentally. It's still Hamas's fault for creating that situation. I think like that's a perfectly fine position to have. Mrs. F says, okay, I had to go back to start as I had it notifications on your live streams. Yes, you got it right. It's, yeah, but you're spelling it again. Is it Annika or Anika? Can you give me how it's pronounced? So I don't know if you saw, but I did the Coleman review. So shout out to Anika, because she's the one who asked me to do it. Myron Gaines for Fresh and Fit says the number of Israelis killed by Israel is about 200. I mean, what the hell does Myron know? You know? What the hell does Myron know? But I do think, actually, I think that he probably got that number somewhere. Electronic Intifada put out an analysis on this, and I think maybe that's the number they did. Let's see if we could find it. But yeah, Electronic Intifada did. I actually didn't even read their analysis, so I wonder how they reached that conclusion. Can you organize a debate between Loanerbox and that Zach Foster guy? I could try. That'd be interesting. Loanerbox didn't get back to me last time I messaged him. I think he's avoiding me at this point. He said he's down to speak, but he doesn't want to talk Israel-Palestine anymore. But then everyone's messaging me telling me that he's talking Israel-Palestine all the time. So I think he's avoiding me. But I'll try. Yeah, here's the Electronic Intifada one. Yeah, so helicopters and fighter craft attacked about 300 targets, mostly in Israeli territory. Mostly means at least 151. I would need to fact check this. I'm just telling you what this is saying. The reason I didn't, I looked in it briefly. The reason I didn't put out analysis is it just wasn't important enough to me, honestly. I don't think it really matters all too much. I would like for Israel to be more transparent and be fully honest. Most Israelis still don't really know everything that happened or didn't happen on October 7th. Just last week, I heard from 3 separate Israelis about a baby being put in an oven, right? So most Israelis still believe that happened. So yeah, that does bother me. October 7th was horrific and deeply traumatizing. An analogy I use, it was like getting a knife to the stomach, and Israel, instead of removing the knife and tending to our wounds, twisted the knife so the world could see how brutal Hamas is. They worsened and leveraged our trauma for PR purposes to manufacture consent to commit an atrocity against another people. So yeah, it definitely bothers me that they did that, and still till today, many Israelis, the stories that are most ingrained in our mind are not quite what happened. And no matter how you spin it, it was horrific and deeply traumatizing, no matter what, right? But our government should want to give us the information. But us having the full story is not ideal for PR, so they care more about PR than our well-being. Mo Kid saying he was watching the protest in real life. Yeah. Somebody said he was watching. That Loanerbox watched me, and you said I heard him talking about you on the stream. What did he say? Huh? What did he say about me? But yeah, I don't know why he doesn't want to talk again then. Maybe I'll message him again. Maybe he just missed it. Well, so Magzi says, ovens and decapitation aside, Hamas killed children. Why even deny this? Well, but who's denying this? But I think if you actually look, they didn't target young children, right? That's another thing. There's this notion that they killed all these babies and young children, but that's also not true. You have 12 children under the age of 12 that were killed, and when you look at how they were killed, none of them were executed. They were all in the crossfires, and this is in line with Islam. With Islam, they view children as holy. They avoid, and children, when I say children, I mean children under 12, because in Islam, once you go through puberty, you're an adult. So I think if they saw teenagers, they tried to kill them, but young children they avoided. We know they avoided them. Just A, the low amount that they killed. B, we even have a video of Hamas shooting a father next to his son and leaving the son there. Again, that's horrific, but they didn't. They weren't going after young children. And I think it's important to know your enemy, right? So Islam will allow you to come in and kill an adult and behead them. That's cool, but it won't allow. But it doesn't. It's not permissible to kill a young child. But there's still this thing that babies were beheaded. Not 40 people say not 40, but babies were beheaded. There were all these babies killed. Most people don't know that one baby was killed, right? And again, 0 babies should have been killed. So I think this is deeply offensive because when people talk about it, they normally talk about it in a way to just like minimize how bad it was. And essentially that's what's happening. So I understand why it's a triggering conversation, but I think we have the right. I think we have the right to just have an honest understanding of what happened. It's our right to know. And if Hamas is our enemy, we should understand them and how they see things. Well, Israeli G, you're saying, I don't know about not hurting children. They did to plenty. So I explained. There's 38 children killed in total. 12 and under, there are 12. And we have their names. We have some amount of information of how they were killed. None are reported to have been killed intentionally. There were some in a car that were shot when they were driving by, 2 in the home that was hit with a tank. Mila Cohen, the baby that was killed, was in her safe room that was shot up. They just shot into the safe room. She was there. Again, wouldn't, like, to the Israelis and Jews and pro-Israel people here, wouldn't you rather have as accurate of an understanding of what happened on October 7th? Israeli Jews saying it's on video. I don't know how you could deny that. What exactly am I denying? Everything I'm talking is based on numbers and facts. What exactly happened that I'm saying didn't happen? Mokied saying, Israeli Jew, you have that Beitar profile pic, doesn't help. That's true. Kung Fu Spider says, in my opinion, you should persist with Loner Box despite his weird behavior on this issue. He has clear holes in his arguments defending the bombings that kill hundreds of people, one of whom is Hamas. But despite that, you should engage him. He doesn't believe these arguments. He just needs to make them due to his audience. Yes, so you think it's because of audience capture? He is the most requested person I speak to, interestingly, so... Oh, Irina's saying something interesting. One of my ex-colleagues was called on the same day to reserve service in Shur camp where the bodies of October 7th victims were brought to and identified, quoting him from November 23rd. There are dozens of people killed by Israeli fire, probably over 100. Also, many of the houses in the kibbutzim looked very similar to what we see in Gaza. That's not something that can be done with an RPG. Yes, some of the houses were hit by tank fire, it seems. And okay, so you heard this directly from a friend. Okay. No, I mean, I don't think we should be surprised by this. And guys, in general, we shouldn't be scared of the truth or offended by the truth, even if the truth doesn't play into our narrative. But there is some interesting psychological component here, right? Because you would think that we would want to discover that we were wrong and it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, but we would rather be right and not need to update what we believe rather than potentially reduce our level of trauma. So it's interesting that we once we believe it was that babies were beheaded, we don't want to be proven wrong about that. So it's interesting. Yeah, audience capture is an interesting one. I think it definitely, to some extent, why am I getting all these new followers on Twitter now? What did I do? Did I just get a big retweet? Some big accounts, Tal Oren, Traveling Clat, who's a friend, but he wasn't following me. Okay. A beer, which is the 300,000 followers. Interesting. Okay. Let's go, blowing up on Twitter. Oh, okay. I understand why. I got a beer retweeted what I wrote. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually, let me read this tweet because I think this is I think this is a good thing to talk about. Ido says, do you really think most relatives of the October 7th victims don't know where and how their relatives died? The family members of the victims probably have a better understanding than the general Israeli population. But let's say, for example, they were killed by Hellfire missiles returning into Gaza and identified a month later. Israel's not saying, hey, we identified the body, they were killed by Hellfire missiles. So there's probably some number of families that don't know the cause of death. ITS is saying debate Tal. Yeah, I spoke to Tal this week. He finally, we've been going back and forth for like a while ago. I eventually stopped. He said, yeah, let's potentially do it. And then he uploaded a story saying, who wants to debate me? And I did a hand raise emoji and he said, let's do it. And then, but we agreed because we're both in Israel, we're going to meet in person and do it in person. So sometime in the next few weeks, there'll be a debate with Tal and myself. Okay. Unless he pulls out, but I don't think he will. Okay. So here's what I wrote. That now this is something that's not, it's just not the most intuitive, but it's something that we really need to understand when talking about some issues. And I've probably spoken about it a little bit. I've probably spoken about it a little bit here on streams, but it's something that I still can't fully explain and articulate that well. But the tweet I wrote that I guess seems to be getting some traction now is, it's Shabbos Kestenbaum. He debated Peter Beinart. Actually, let's watch the clip. Let's just do. Um, we should get Shabos on, huh?
When you allow them to have a voice in government through the ballot box, which doesn't require violence, everyone becomes safer.
You are literally describing Ariel Sharon's rationale for unilaterally leaving Gaza in 2005 by digging up the graves of Jews who were buried in Gaza, by allowing the Palestinians in Gaza to elect their own government. These arguments were already deployed in 2005, and look what it led to. Again, I'm sympathetic to everything you were describing. However, where I stop is reality. The reality is that the Palestinian people are a compilation of choices. They can make decisions in life. They have decided in 2005 to elect Hamas. They have decided to this day to not reveal where a single hostage has been held. They continuously, by all polling data, support the idea of Hamas remaining in power, not going into exile, not surrendering. And your idea that, well, if we just allow them into our country and gave them citizenship, because as the Talmud says, whose blood is redder than ours, and if we allowed them to go to our pharmacies, they would just love us so much. Peter, my contention with you is you are not dealing with reality, because these arguments were not only deployed, but Israelis who actually live in Israel, who live a stone throw away from Gaza, were doing all of those things you just said, and half of them are dead.
Yeah, I mean,
first of all, he said 3 points of misinformation, but that's not the point of the tweet. But there's 3 points of misinformation. First of all, less than 10% of Gazans alive voted for Hamas because of when it was in the age of the population and the amount of people that voted for them then. That's one. Two, only around 9%, the same amount, around 9% of Gazans today support Hamas. That's two. And three, he says not a single one gave up a hostage, but I'm actually not sure that's true. I'm pretty sure the Noah Argamani rescue mission was based on intel from a Gazan informant, and we don't know what else Gazan informants have said. So there's just a lot of bullshit there. But the main point is what I will read now, and then maybe we could have a discussion about it. Shabbos argues that Palestinian situation is a result of their bad choices, invoking an idea of collective agency. The truth is, collective agency doesn't exist, and believing it does is dangerous. Individual agency is important. People make choices, and society rewards or discourages them. Outliers who harm others can be addressed through law or social norms. Collective agency, on the other hand, doesn't function the same way. A society isn't one unified decision maker. It's millions of individuals shaped by the conditions around them. So when large numbers are pushed toward the same bad choice, for example, voting for Hamas, it's because environmental conditions like fear, trauma, propaganda, lack of alternatives have led them to believe that it is in their best interest. At that point, agency breaks down. These aren't outliers that can be corrected by punishment or persuasion. The conditions need to be transformed in order to change the collective will of the people. When people like Shabbos invoke collective agency, it's almost always to assign blame to an entire people and then justify harming them. It focuses on the people and not the conditions that created them. Always humanize the people while working to change the conditions that shape who they are. So that's the tweet. And this is, it's a concept that very much informs how I approach activism, even though this is the first time I've ever written something about it. Like, pay attention. I never demonize people. It's always about humanizing the people, but criticizing the institutions. And I'm saying this because I think this is how we should approach changing situations. So when we get a poll that 60-something% of Israelis believe there's no innocence in Gaza, that's often used to demonize the entire Israeli population. People say they need to be re-education camps, or that it's used to justify harm against them. That stat is only relevant, in my opinion, when we want to understand what's happening in Gaza, because if that's how radical the population is, it's relevant to understand what a population that radical is going to do in Gaza. But citing that just for the means of demonization, no. The Israeli population are radical to the extent they are because of conflict, because of trauma, because of fear. The solution is to find a long-term solution to the conflict. And then most of the ideological problems both our people have are solved through a long-term solution. So again, criticize, even demonize the institutions, humanize the people. I think that's the approach. Code's expertise says 9% of Palestinians support Hamas is total bullshit. It's way more. Well, I'm talking about Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, there's been polls coming out the past few months, and they've all been low double-digit, high single-digit. You're welcome to look it up. You could say it's bullshit if it makes you feel more comfortable, or you could do basic research and see. Israeli Jesus, aren't you advocating for collective agency for Israelis? I don't know. I at least try to, regardless of the conditions that shaped. No, not at all. No, I'm always. No, you got to pay attention, my guy. Pretty much all my critique is not Israelis. It's Israel. It's IDF. It's institutions. And I get pushback from this from my pro-Palestine viewers, that they say I'm justifying genocidal beliefs when I say, obviously, it was a clip I released a while ago, and a lot of people got upset, but I don't care because I think that it's relevant and true. The majority of Israelis support ethnically cleansing Gazans, and the majority of Palestinians support ethnically cleansing Israelis. Obviously, why wouldn't you want to ethnically cleanse your enemy? Why wouldn't you want to get rid of somebody you've been in conflict with for 100 years? That's obvious. If you were in their shoes, you would also want to get rid of them. The difference between you and the person you hate is that you were born in your shoes and not in theirs. That's just a fundamental truth that I think it's helpful to live by. Mokiet says, careful, Adar, with this tweet. You're making the claim that genocide is not a real crime. No, that's bullshit. Udo says, it was very bad. Killing people with knives and calling to your parents to say you're glad you killed them is not the same as killing civilians while hitting a military target. I spoke about this earlier. I don't want to get into it more, but our morality is very much dependent on the amount of power we have and the conditions we grow up in. And you could look at an isolated incident of killing one person with a knife is worse than killing one person accidentally in an airstrike, but is killing 38 children worse than killing 20,000 children? I don't think so. I don't think we don't have the moral high ground. We just don't. What we do is, and this has just been it's been a tactic of colonial powers, but I think it's far beyond colonial powers. And it's not just the powerful do it, the weak do it. Everybody creates rules of engagement and rules of war where they can do no wrong and where everything their enemy does is wrong. But we see this very clearly played out in the powerful versus the weak, that their killing is barbaric. It's unsophisticated. It's shooting at point blank. It's with knives. That's what barbarians do. For us, it's a well-educated pilot doing it with sophisticated technology. We're not the barbarians we're killing. Right. This is an argument that precedes colonialism. I imagine Romans were making similar arguments when they were conquering land, and all conquerors were saying that we are this great nation that are conquering these more primitive barbaric people. Very similar nature to what's happening here. We killed 20,000 children, but we still feel like we have a moral high ground because they killed 38 in a way that we find to be more brutal. When incinerating people and blowing up limbs is actually pretty much as brutal as it gets. We can't hide behind intentionality at a certain level of scale. At some scale, the Sorry, it wasn't on purpose. It just doesn't land. Yeah, Israel AG, you want to join? Yeah, I'll bring you on stage. All right, you could join.
Hello?
What's up? Should I call you Israeli G or your name here on Discord?
Yeah, you can call me Anan. You can call me Anan.
Okay, what's up, Anan? I guess this is the first time we've had you on. And real quick, before you start, for those who want to join our Discord where we do a lot of conversations, I'm dropping the link in chat. It's also in my bio on Twitter, and it's in the description here on YouTube as well. But join. We got some good stuff going. All right, Anan. Yeah, what's up, man?
Yeah, last time I came on, but I talked for like 3 minutes and then it was over.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so I just have I guess I listen to everything that you say, but it just doesn't change my position even one bit. I think that this, I think you don't. Maybe I'll go down the path of saying that I don't think you focus enough on the roots of the issue, which is this is a religious conflict between Muslims who according to their religion, there's a lot of things in their religion, but they believe that Jews should stay under them Islamically. Mm-hmm. So when the Jews and there's also a lot of other like almost halachic, you know what I mean, like beliefs that the Muslims have, but very shortly, especially Israel, which is what they would say is on stolen like Islamic land, that is like the core root of this issue. And I think if you are unjustly fighting people who came peacefully and wanted to like split the land, I think at some point I don't think you have any more high ground no matter what. And I would compare this to like, let's say Ukraine and Russia. Like if tomorrow Ukraine decided to like mass execute like hundreds of Russian soldiers, which would be illegal according to international law, nobody would say we need to stop supporting Ukraine because they are just in this war. And also we have our own, you know, obviously we don't want Russia to take over the world. Regardless, we're going to support them, right? So I would say in the exact same reason, you could even tell me that the IDF is killing 10 Gazans for every one soldier or one Hamas. I would say that maybe that would be a bit too much. Maybe I would say, okay, I don't know, but I would still support the war because I want to protect myself. The overarching narrative is what's important.
Yeah, so there's a few points. One is about Islam, and then the other is about level of proportionality in war, and if it's justified based on what the mission is. So I'll start with the Islam point. So I think it's a mistake to have literal interpretations of religion and believe that all people of that religion are going to have that interpretation for eternity. Because we see very clearly in front of our eyes that every religion has endless interpretations, and in most instances, culture supersedes religion, where there will be cultural progress that doesn't quite fit in the religion, and they will drop certain ideas. So the Torah says that we can own slaves, right? And the Talmud says we should enslave the Gentiles. Now, anti-Semites use this against us. They say, look at the Talmud, look what it says. That's what they're trying to do. But what the text says is not...
I don't think that's true, but let's not go into the Talmud. That's like a...
Wait. But have you looked at some of the... There's some problematic texts in the Talmud.
No. I've looked at a lot of the things that are in the Talmud, and most of them are completely out of context. They have like no seed of truth in them.
Okay, well, so let's focus even just on the slavery one. But the Talmud does have a lot of problematic stuff. But the whole point is that all religions, or at least the monotheistic ones, right? They have very problematic texts that justify very, very problematic things. But as culture developed, we understood, wait a minute, I could believe in the Torah, I could believe in God, but owning slaves is wrong.
Right.
So
no, notice I never made this argument.
No. But you said one of the problems is Islam, and they say that Jews need to be under us. Therefore, you see that
I'm explaining to you why they did what they did according to Islamic theology. I'm not saying Islamic theology is necessarily always going to be the problem.
So
I'm explaining to you what happened and why they did.
Wait, so are you talking about October 7th specifically?
Well, it's the same. By the way, I could compare this. Let me put it like more clearly. No, I'm talking in general. I'm talking like 1948.
Oh no. So wait, hold on. So
yeah,
I think also Islam, did it impact how the response to Zionism, perhaps, but we have countless historical examples of populations showing up to a land en masse, and every single time it's met with violence, regardless of Islam is in the equation or not. So I don't again, even there, it's a mistake to attribute that to Islam. Native Americans fought violently the European colonizers. Every single population throughout history that dealt with mass immigration of a population claiming land for their own, there was always violence. So to say here it's because of Islam,
but
that doesn't make sense.
Historically, they almost always came with violence. So of course they would be answered with violence. But even according to, actually, I'll use like Islam for the other side. I would say that actually Islam literally acknowledges, like Muslims know that this land, like if you look at I forgot the name of the empire that used to be the Islamic Empire. It had coins that literally had the menorah on those coins. So under Islam, they acknowledge that this is Jewish land. This has been politicized, and I understand it, but that's the reality on the ground.
So that
they do it because of Islam. And I would say, wait, one last thing, just to make my point clearer.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same as like a huge empire existing for a lot of years, and you know, obviously we all know empires. If you know Turkish people, I know a bunch of Turkish people, I know a bunch of, you know, Muslims. They all create this magical utopia under their empires. You know, each empire was the best. So this is the same thing with the Muslims. They take it as an insult, and I think it's a lot more than just religion. I think there's like real emotions that are in play. Like, we ruled all this place, and now you Jews are taking all the power back. Like, how does that happen?
So it's interesting because I think you made a point that kind of strengthens what I'm saying, because Islam also says that this is Jewish land, right? So
yeah.
But what's happening is they're humans having a human reaction. It's not as simple as Muslims having a Muslim reaction. It's humans having a human reaction to their conditions. And you said
they're having a human reaction specifically to Jews. They didn't have a human reaction to Egyptians or Jordanians, right?
Well, give me a specific. You're saying when Egypt ruled,
controlled Gaza, and Jordan ruled the West.
Well, hold on.
Have that human reaction to them.
Hold on. That was sovereignty. That was not mass migration of population, and they weren't happy about it. There was you see there's writings calling it out, and it's interesting what would have happened had we never taken the land back. They most likely either would have been absorbed into these countries. It would have been annexed. They would have been absorbed in these countries and been made part of the countries. And if they would be kept a separate oppressed population, they very likely would have resisted that, because that's what people do. But it's not. It's different when it's just a country that has sovereignty than mass immigration. There's a very specific human dynamic that we've seen hundreds of times throughout history, and it's not always. You said, but every other time they started with violence. That's not, in many instances, yes, but you just need to understand. We would do the same exact thing. If we had massive amounts of people immigrating to, you live in Jerusalem, if there were massive amounts of people immigrating, saying, guys, this land is ours. We're gonna take it from the Jews living here. This is ours, and they're moving, and they're being demeaning to you and your friends. You don't think some of the Beitar Yerushalayim people would take up, fight them? Eventually, they would. They'd be like, no, fuck these guys. We'd fight them. And then imagine, right? That's a very natural response. It's not an Islamic
But
response.
that's
It's not
we're all stupid animals, right? But Adar,
No, no,
these are
but
people
ex-
super
well,
stupid
but there
animals
we
who
go.
don't
No, no,
understand the Jewish connection to the land.
No, no,
because
no.
They all understood it. That's
no,
the
no,
point.
no.
That's the point that I made.
I don't think they understood that Europeans who, this was prior to DNA tests, Europeans who claimed to have been from the land thousands of years ago. I don't think it was obvious that this is an indigenous population returning. Nor do I know if it would have made a difference. But I actually,
No, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if your framing is the reason why Palestinians were violent towards us is because they're just stupid animals, the same way we're all stupid animals, I accept that framing.
No.
I accept that framing as long as you
I
just say we're all stupid
don't.
animals.
No. I don't accept your current framing of them being humans. I know because I talk to these people daily. I know that these people are. Sorry, am I shouting or something?
No. You just said
No.
You just said I don't accept your framing of these people being humans. So I thought that was a pretty funny thing to say.
Oh no, animals. I said.
No, you said humans. That's why I laughed. It was a funny. Yeah. You said I don't accept the framing of these people being humans.
Anyways, the point that I'm making is that I know because I talk to these people. When I ask them like specific questions, like I asked, you have a guy that was constantly around your chat. What's his name? Justin? Justin.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I asked him I sat here in a debate one day and I asked him, like, do you believe that a Jewish state could exist? And he's a pretty liberal Palestinian, you could say, right? Probably one of the more. That's why he's here. And he said, no, there could never be a Palestinian state Islamically. This is just not going to happen. So they still go by that definition.
No,
of
I don't
Islam.
think. I think you might have. Justin's I don't want to say anti-Islam. He supports a two-state solution. He's a two-stater. So I don't know if you misunderstood him.
Clearly, he's not, because I told him, can there be I guess he's a two-stater like Yasser Arafat, but we all know that's not a two-stater. No. That's a two-stater.
Look, let me try to convince you that as much as religion plays some role, it's not the central role. And we focusing on it actually gets us away from focusing on the human dynamics that people are responding to. Because when we look around,
but you don't understand how Muslims think when you say this.
No,
I mean, you can
no,
play these games.
No. I do. I do. Okay. Look,
clearly you don't, because you don't even know the guy that you've talked to, which was in this channel. You don't know what he thinks about his Islamic obligations.
Justin,
I know this because he told me this.
Justin he's a secular nationalist, if anything. But let's talk through it. Okay.
They call them cultural Muslims. I don't believe that.
Cool. Like most secular Jews are cultural Jews. You're giving.
You agree with it.
Wait, Anan. Let me.
Jews don't have something against Muslims living here. That's the thing.
Anan,
there's nothing to do with that in Judaism.
Anan, you keep cutting me off. So let me finish. Okay.
Sorry.
First of all, if many Israelis do have something against Muslims living here as a result of what Muslims have done to us. Okay, the same way Muslims have issue with us because of what we've done to them. Humans responding as humans otherwise would. Now, when we look at the Muslim world, we see vast difference in opinion across the Muslim world because culture is more dominant than Islam. But we also see us making peace with the Muslim world. We see Jews today are safer in Dubai than they are in New York. Okay, we see Bahrain, Morocco, we're normalized with them. We see Jordan and Egypt, we have a soft peace with them. We have Saudi Arabia open to normalization with Israel, given a two-state solution. We have al-Shara in Syria, ex-Al-Qaeda, open to normalizing ties with Israel. We have Muslim Arab Israelis serving in the IDF. And you know what? We have Christian Palestinians engaging in acts of terror. Clearly, there's something stronger, more important, more relevant to focus on than the religion. Religion plays into it. It affects our belief in psychology to some extent. But before we're Muslim, before we're Christian, before we're Jewish, we're human. And if we create the right environment for humans to get along and respect and support one another, then you solve the conflict. So I think it's a mistake to constantly be getting caught up on the religious aspect of this.
I think you have to get caught up on the religious aspect, because that's how a lot of Muslims think. They ask themselves in the morning, what do I do now? Do I go with my right foot? Do I get with my right foot out of bed, or do I go with my left foot? They listen even to that. They go according to the Quran. If you talk to a lot of these people, maybe I talk to just jihadists. I don't know, maybe, but apparently jihadists are also here. So I don't know. So they have. It's incredibly important.
You're talking.
For these people.
You're talking. Well, I don't know who you're talking to, but if you're talking to Palestinians, you're talking to people who we have been oppressing for decades. So clearly, how they are going to perceive us is dependent on that. Right, but
no, they just tell me, according to our Quran, you can't exist here unless it's.
I know. We find.
They don't tell me I hate you because you killed this and that. No, they tell me Islamically we cannot allow it.
We often find religious justification that maps on in a way that's relevant to the experience we're having. I get it, yeah. And when people own slaves, we're saying, yes, we're allowed to own slaves because it says so in the Torah or in the Bible or in the Quran. And now we don't do that anymore because we understand it's wrong. We shouldn't get caught up in that. People change. There's Muslims who serve in the IDF. There's many Middle Eastern countries who are coming to terms with our existence. And there's Christians who are oppressed by us that also want to engage in violence against us. So, I think if we really... Yeah, go ahead. Anyways, I made my case here. I don't even have all much to say on the religion thing. I think but I want you to reflect on it, because I think what I'm saying is actually pretty
No, I'm hearing everything that you say, but you do this a lot. You do moral relativism when you say, oh, this is just two religions, and you stick up to it. You're like, oh no, there's no way that we Jews have nothing against Muslims and they do against us. Like this, it's not possible. But it is possible. And what you're saying right now about slavery, and you're comparing it to the core tenets of Islam that say to conquer the world, and they talk about Prophet Muhammad being the perfect guy who goes around mass converting every single person who's not a Christian or a Jew, and forcing the Christians and Jews to live under them. This is all things that are the essence of the Quran. Okay, now I know that you don't care about that, but then comparing this to slavery in Judaism, there's nothing that holifies slavery in Judaism. Nothing. This isn't something that you have to do. This is something that you could do back in the day. So this is something completely different. And if we do this moral relativism and we compare stuff every day that has nothing to do with each other, we're not going to actually sharpen our thoughts. We're just going to get lost in the sauce, and I don't see a point of doing that.
What you would need to do to make a compelling case is to explain why there's something psychologically and theologically, something psychologically different about Muslims and something theologically different about Islam, that they're unlike anybody else in the world, and that there's only one interpretation of the religion. And then you would also need to go ahead and explain why there are many Muslims that don't live by that or believe that. It just doesn't, what you're saying doesn't map reality. It doesn't map our observable reality. It just doesn't map a reality.
Well, it does, because I mean, if you look at like top leaderships in the Islamic world, and you say this is the most Islamic, this is the least, you're pretty much going to get the least secular ones, or sorry, the least Muslim ones are friendliest to Israel. That's almost wholeheartly the way.
Wait, what is it?
In Dubai, it's maybe a little bit differently. In the UAE, it's a little bit differently.
No, but Anan,
really, Anan. Dubai is literally the sin city of the Middle East. So I don't know why you would make that argument.
That's my point. You said if you look the less secular ones, the more secular ones. Wait a minute, but they're all Muslim. You see how vastly different Muslim.
No, they're not.
No. But wait. But they are. That's the thing. We're very clearly seeing how different society. They don't follow Islam. So they might be like even. No. They do, just not in the way that you're thinking. So what you've essentially said is, if they don't believe If they don't view Islam this way, then they're not Islam. So it's almost like there's like a circular reasoning here. It's unfalsifiable. You're saying, well, if they're Muslim, but they don't believe that Jews should live under them, then they're not real Muslims. Only Muslims that believe this, they're the real Muslims. And look, all the Muslims that believe this happen to believe that we should live under them. That's circular reasoning, and it's unfalsifiable. It's not.
Well, it's not unfalsifiable because Islam has laws, so it's falsifiable. But
every religion has laws, and they all change and reform over time, and humans have different interpretations, and that's just a constant throughout history. It's a constant throughout history. We're human before we're Muslim, or we're human before we're any other religion, and we just need to create the conditions where the different Muslim countries accept us. But if we keep scapegoating,
I mean, many of these countries that you've defined, many of these countries that you've defined as like, oh, they're just secular Muslims. Many of these people are literally converting away from Islam every day that passes by. Like as Azerbaijanis, if you tell them you are Muslim, they'll barely say yes. If you go to Persians, you'll tell them, the majority of Persians, you'll tell them they're Muslim, they'll start stuttering because they barely want to be called Muslims. The thing about Islam is it's not like Judaism, like you're used to these sorts of religion, or Christianity, because these people, if they wholeheartedly denounce Islam, they are on the major aim of every single Islamic fanatic that there is. So they are, by definition, they have to stay within that structure without believing any of what's said in the book, because they can't. If you're a Muslim and you don't believe Muhammad was the perfect man, you are not a Muslim. This is the only way to interpret this text. But of course, people will stand on the sidelines and identify as Muslims so they don't get slaughtered by ISIS or their neighbor.
No, it's because they have a connection to Islam and a different interpretation than what the hardliners or religious Muslims have, and maybe some.
What's their interpretation? You know.
Wait, hold on. Let me give you examples. Yeah. I go to different interfaith meetings, camping trips with Israelis and Palestinians. I recently went to Hamburg. So recently I was in Hamburg with a delegation of Israelis and Palestinians. I sat at a restaurant with Muslims. They were eating pork and drinking beer, and they all had a connection to Islam. How do you explain that?
My point.
No.
In Islam, if you do this, you are not Muslim.
Yeah. The hardliners would say so, exactly. So you're allowing.
It's not the hardliners; it's the people who follow.
Wait. Hold on. Anand.
These people define themselves as Muslim because it gives them privileges.
Anand.
If you turn to Christian, they have no reason to say no. I'm not Muslim. They have no reason. Give me a single reason that they would say I'm not Muslim.
Well,
nobody goes after Muslims. It's Muslims going after non-Muslims. Terror attacks.
I'm telling
Muslims
you.
aren't targeted largely.
I'm telling you. Their interpretation of Islam, it's not their interpretation. They said, yeah, I don't believe I need to follow everything to believe in Allah and XYZ. Now, you could have the hardliners say they're not Muslim, and we don't have something.
Well, they're believing in God. They're not Muslims.
Hold on. We don't have something exactly comparable in Judaism, because for us it's an ethno-religion. But imagine if there was a sect of Judaism that would say, if you don't do the mitzvot, you're not a Jew. And then somebody would say, you see, none of the secular Jews, they're not real Jews because they don't do X, Y, Z. You're doing something. Wait. Okay, fair, but they don't. That's fine.
Sects exist.
Okay, cool. They don't get to define what a Jew is, but you're letting those Muslims define what a Muslim is. And so you're essentially saying the only people I recognize that are Muslims are a certain type of Muslim, and this certain type of Muslim believes X, Y, Z. But that's not Islam. That's one interpretation of Islam. And the fact that there's many other interpretations should give us a great sense of hope that this interpretation of Islam that you fear is one of many, and that if you change the conditions, you're going to change the interpretation. And we see how we actually have peace or friendly ties with most of our Muslim neighbors currently. That counts for something. We have security cooperations with the PLO, which is primarily Muslims.
We don't have any peace with any of our neighbors. We actually have peace with their governments, which their governments are secular. They're completely they are secular people. They're not.
Except
by name.
that's true, except for UAE and Bahrain, that they're religious Muslim. In fact, they've done something different. Well, I don't know. We can make assumptions about leaders. They might just pretend to be Muslim because for whatever, the same way Trump pretends to believe in Jesus. So it's hard to make assumptions about them. But UAE is a Muslim country. It's like it's in many ways a theocracy. They make some exceptions in Dubai for tourism, etc. Saudi Arabia, but we see a shift. Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing. So in Saudi Arabia, just a few years ago, women got the right to drive. Nothing in the Quran changed. There's been no change in the Quran, but something in the culture changed. So that's what we need to understand. The only constant is change.
I don't disagree with that. The Muslim world is going to a good place away from Islam.
Okay.
I don't disagree with
that. No. But when you say that's a very. Imagine if somebody were saying we can never have peace with Jews, but I'm happy there's more and more secular Jews. They're moving away from Judaism.
I have to address that too, because that was your previous argument. I'm not good at this debating stuff, because I have to write every single thing that you said so I can.
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
But basically the thing that you said before about comparing it to Jews, obviously Jews are an ethno-religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Muslims can easily say you're not part of our religion, and that's going to be it. And I would say the same for Jewish sects. They might say you're not Jewish and Jews will agree with that. They'll say, I eat pork. I'm not part of the Jewish religion, right? I don't follow the Jewish religion. Largely, at the very least,
mm-hmm.
or it's there's definitely going to be issues there. So I think it's you do this a lot. I don't know if you know this. I don't want to offend you or something, but I feel like you do a lot of moral relativism, and every time you do it, I'm I have to point you out on, even if it doesn't matter, because I feel like we've gotten some sort of agreement. I felt like we've got to an agreement, but I also feel like every time you do that, I have to make it a point that there is no relativism between completely different things. So because I feel like we got to a place where we're agreeing that you might say it's fine. They can be Muslim and only take the parts that they believe in God, and that we shouldn't kill children in war. Okay, stuff like that. That wasn't necessary. I'm saying, okay, I could even go along with it. I don't care. I'm not gonna go to Dubai and tell them, I really hope you guys leave Islam, because no, if they're cool with us, I'm just gonna accept that, right?
Yeah.
And since they're largely going secular, if they have this version of secular Islam, that's fine. But I'm saying that doesn't represent what we've seen here. That doesn't represent what we've seen with Hamas, who's a self-declared, jihadist organization, basically. And it goes back to 1948. So I would say during this whole time, we have definitely the Quran influencing people. Just like if you're a Christian born into a Catholic family and everybody tells you Jews killed Jesus, you're probably gonna think all the bad things about these people. Even if they come peacefully, even if they give you jobs, even if they come into your land, they give you jobs. They make the land thrive. They do agriculture all over the land. After many years, there was not much. You'll still hate them. And I understand it, but this is exactly the point that I'm trying to say. This is motivated from that place, and I would say you could even make the argument that we need to support this new wave of Islam. That's fine. I would say that's not necessarily the
okay. Cool. I think we're finding some common ground here. So the way to weaken Islamic extremism in Palestinian society is to create the right conditions for that to happen. So I think what a lot of people don't know is Palestinian society in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and actually much prior, there was one of the most secular societies in the entire Middle East. And Palestinians still, relative to a lot of the other Middle Eastern countries, are pretty damn secular. You go to Ramallah, there's bars.
Ramallah is like the Palestinian Tel Aviv, from my understanding.
Yeah,
so
but
I don't say that much.
But again,
no, I understand.
So it's still.
We also see it in Israel, right? In Israel proper, it's even better.
Exactly.
The the good side of the Muslims coming out, and that's it. We barely see the bad, right? Like,
well, so this is exactly my point. I don't like the good and the bad, because I'm very
I know this is bad terminology.
I want to be careful, because Islam is a faith that means a lot to people. The same way if we were talking about Judaism, right? And if I was talking to a non-Jew now and they're saying, yeah, I like that they're going from the bad Judaism to the good Judaism, I'd be careful with that language.
I meant Muslims. I should have said Muslims.
No, all good. I just wanted to point that out. But
sure.
But clearly we see, I think Israel's a good example, right? They live here amongst us. And it's not a perfect situation, but they're interacting with Jews. They have friendships with Jews. They own businesses. They're working good jobs. And that very much impacts their relationship with the religion, right? So clearly you didn't need to change anything in the religion. You just need to change the environmental conditions, and then the way they interface with this belief system changes. So that's why I think the focus on Islam is focusing on the wrong thing. We need to change on the conditions which increase the chance that somebody's going to have a radical interpretation of it. So that's all I'm saying.
I just felt like bringing it up because it's an important thing to understand historically when you want to deal with people. It's also important to understand why anti-Semitic people are being anti-Semitic towards Jewish people for the same reason. And me that talk to many of these people, I can kind of get a good taste of why they're doing what they're doing. I absolutely agree with you that there are more impactful things that we can do on the ground. Like for instance, I'm going to say something you won't like, just to, sort of create that division that's going to lead to a conversation. But I would say that if we completely annexed the West Bank and Gaza, we would lead to the perfect situation where they first of all, they'll have to coexist with us, because that's what Arab Israelis have to do, and they're going to have to moderate their Islamic beliefs. I mean, right now in Israel, it doesn't work perfectly, because there's still, ironically, the only thing I don't believe they should have, they're abusing against us. They're bringing in people who are, some of them Islamists into power, but most of them are just, I would say, people who deny the right for Israel to exist, I would say, largely. And they're abusing that part. I think everything else, the coexistence, the power that we have, is doing only good for the Muslim people. And I know this because I have many Muslim friends. They would probably hardly define as Muslim. So I don't know, but I have real life friends from Muslim family, and I see it with my own eyes. I see the coexistence under Israeli rule.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like we found some common ground. Good stuff. But so would you say, I know we still have many fundamental disagreements, but so is your idea that you think Israel should rule the entire land and then give everyone citizenship?
Well, I mentioned it, right? I mentioned, like, the only thing they're abusing is what we shouldn't give them, right? Which is the voting. So I'm saying they're voting for incredibly anti-Israel people.
I don't know if they're abusing it. You just don't like what they believe. That's not an abuse.
Well, I don't like that they don't think we should exist as a Jewish state. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So right. So the solution to that is to transform the state into a state that to us is Jewish, but to them feels like not a foreign state,
Yeah, just like Jews, just like. Why can't we make this a Jewish ethno state when there's like, besides the
I'll tell you why.
But at this point, I don't think it matters.
I'll tell you why.
When there's, all of the Muslim countries are to some extent like ethno religions. Especially, Saudi Arabia and these countries, which bring in all those workers that have zero rights. Like most of the people there don't have voting rights, and also it's I think it's entrenched in their constitution or something along these lines. Basically, non-Muslims can't even have citizenship.
Yeah, but you need to look. There's a difference between not giving workers and immigrants the same rights as the native population, to a Jewish ethno-state built on a land that has, depending on...
That was ruled by Muslims?
Well, not that was ruled by Muslims, that has a significant population that is not Jewish. So let's just talk Israel proper, right? 20% of Israel proper are a native population that aren't Jewish. So it's not the same as Saudi Arabia saying this is a Muslim country, but workers aren't going to have the same rights. Because we're not talking about workers and immigrants.
No, that's not the same. You're right.
Yes, exactly. So while there are other ethno-states, we have one of the most challenging, one of the most controversial ethno-states because we have a native population that's not Jewish. So we need to find ways to make the non-Jewish population as much a part of society as possible and work to end discrimination, both systemic and amongst individuals, and and again, the symbolism might be the hardest part, because the Hatikva is also Ashkenazi centric if you think about it, right? Because it's about, isn't there a line about like coming from the West or something? But
I don't think you'll convince Mizrahi Jews that it's Ashkenazi though.
They've accepted it. No, that's true. But the symbolism might be the hardest part. But there's definitely a lot we could do in society to better integrate Palestinian citizens of Israel or Arab Israelis, however they identify, and that would help it. But it's true that if we have a minority population that doesn't feel as part of society, that's going to create problems. Now, I'll say I live here in the north. It works. It doesn't mean it's perfect. They do have grievances over not getting ishurim to build. There's a problem with expanding permits to build. But the coexistence we have here is beautiful. It's all love. And again, this is Western Galilee, my little pocket here. But there's other places where it's less so. But here it's amazing. If what we could achieve here, we could achieve throughout the whole land, then we've won. We've succeeded. But yeah, it's we got to work.
This is the exact same. This is the exact same thing that we're seeing right now from Arab countries. It's when Israel exerts enough power, and in this situation, it's economic. People will accept Israel, and that's going to be only good for them, right? That's what we're seeing everywhere. And I think it's the same thing with Palestinians. The whole idea of being Palestinian was born by the Arab world in order to counter the fact that the Jews had a state, and it threatened their you can say their empire. Even I'm not even going to Islam like that deeply, right? So. This is the exact idea that I'm saying. We should be as powerful as possible without, I'm not saying we should, greater Israel and stuff like that. This is not what I'm looking for. But I'm saying if people do attack us, we need to make sure that every time we're being attacked, we're stronger than we were before. And that means whatever. It means if Hezbollah is shooting at us from Lebanon, we go to the Litani. Or we get a ceasefire deal, which is going to be good. Maybe, let's see. Maybe Lebanon right now will uphold their agreements, right? But this is what I believe, and this is what I think should happen. And I think we had last time a conversation right here. Yeah, we had a conversation about tribalism, and people said it's really bad that we're being tribalistic. Well, the whole Middle East is tribalistic. The best thing we can be is just a really strong tribe, because that's going to be good for everybody. And we've seen it throughout history, right? The worst thing that happened to Gazans, and we all know this now, unfortunately, we didn't know this before, but was that Israel left Gaza. It was worse than what it was before.
Gaza's worse after we left it, you're saying?
I mean, everybody acknowledges that, right?
But look, it's...
Is it getting tired? Late?
No, it is getting late. I'm going on 3 hours and 20 minutes. We'll talk a few more minutes and then we'll wrap it up. If you want to argue that us holding all the land is better, then we need to integrate the population that we're controlling. You can't have a status quo where Palestinians are neither sovereign nor equal. We need to choose one. It can't be neither. Neither will always lead to more violence. So it's true.
Did it lead to more violence before 1967? 1967? Or not 1967. Before When was it? After 1967.
Well, yeah, we had the second Intifada and the first Intifada, and then we've had October
Well, the second
7th.
Intifada was after we made America give them a bunch of weapons and push for their self-determination. Before that, Israelis could go into any Palestinian major town.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Do
But
anything they want.
yeah, of course. But what happened? We started incentivizing our citizens to move into the West Bank and take more and more land. The same grievance they still never forgave us for. We just started doing more of the same. So yeah, 1967, you could there was a clear military justification to hold that land, but moving our citizens into there, incentivizing them to move into there, that's a choice. That was a choice, and it's a choice that led to the first Intifada, which the first Intifada was actually primarily nonviolent, which we responded to with violence. Second Intifada was more violence. Palestinians are not going to accept being neither sovereign or equal. So I don't have a strong ideological objection to holding the whole land, but then we just need to share it. We need institutions that protect and treat us all as equal. And if we don't want to do that because we fear demographic concern, well, then we need to give them their own sovereignty. And if they decide to use that sovereignty to attack us, which I don't think is what's going to happen, but if they do, then we'll need to deal with that when it happens. But it can't. The status quo, it's immoral and unsustainable. We can't accept that as the norm. We just can't.
No, but you said Israel, like Palestinians will not accept either lack of equality or like lack of sovereignty. And I would say that they had the opportunity to get sovereignty. They did get sovereignty actually in Gaza, and they clearly failed it, and clearly they became more violent than they were before.
Wait, hold on.
The equality.
But let's talk about it. Okay,
let's talk about it.
Okay, they got their sovereignty. So part of their sovereignty is elections. Okay, and I get it. It would have been better had they voted for the PA, but they voted for Hamas, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm actually not making this argument.
Okay.
I actually don't know if it would make it better that they vote for the PA. Absolutely.
Well,
I don't see any like the PLO historically was as bad as like
No,
Hamas
okay.
in terms
Yeah,
of like
but
their operations, and the PLO was part of the PA. So the only difference, okay, I need to make it just clear so you understand what I think. Okay, so the only reason the PA coexists with Israel is because we have a gun to their head. If not, I would say they would be pretty similar to Hamas.
What does that mean, a gun to their head?
We have a gun to their head. We have, first of all, we have like an insane infrastructure of intelligence there that literally we probably literally have somebody inside of Abbas's cabinet which can kill him at any point. Secondly, we have settlements everywhere. We've got soldiers who are pretty much controlling the whole West Bank at any given point. So of course, and also we've got Hamas from the other side, which forces
hold on.
to have to take our side.
Wait. But look. The PLO used to be more extreme than Hamas, and through negotiation, we got to a point where they recognized Israel's right to exist in 1993, and now we've had decades of security cooperation with them. They share intel with us, and they even arrest Palestinians who are likely to engage in acts of terror. The fact that a Palestinian faction went from being more extreme than Hamas to this is something that we should recognize as a major victory and understand how even a people who we've oppressed through negotiation can moderate. Now, our big mistake was we didn't reward their moderation, right? The reason why Hamas is more popular than the PA is because Palestinians view them as more effective. When Hamas was violent towards us in Gaza, we withdrew from Gaza. When the PA recognized the right to exist, and when we had security cooperations with them, what did we do? We didn't reward them with sovereignty. We just expanded settlements, expanded our security apparatus, and essentially our oppression over the Palestinians. So in the mind of Palestinians, they said, look, violence works. Moderation doesn't work. If we had an opportunity to prove, cooperate with us, and you will get statehood, and you will have your own state, sovereignty, a good life. That's what you get through cooperation. But we didn't do that. We did the opposite. We rewarded violence and imposed the consequence on moderation. Now, we never really had, Gaza wasn't really sovereign. They weren't sovereign. After Hamas was elected, Hamas tried to negotiate a truce with us. We refused to even, we didn't counteroffer them. We didn't try to negotiate anything. We just put a brutal blockade on them. Not just blockading weapons from coming in, but vital goods, and we stopped 100% of exports. We destroyed their economy. That's not a sovereign state. It's not. So they never had a sovereign state. We've never given them that. We've never even offered them that. Oslo was not a fully sovereign state. We would control their.
I'm pretty sure there was 2 years in the middle, right? I'm pretty sure there was 2 years in the middle that they had sovereignty. We even built them an airport, and then Hamas got into power and instantly started launching rockets, and then it started getting into power. So it's not like they didn't have sovereignty. They got sovereignty. They just did something really specific with that sovereignty.
No, I don't think the timeline. The rockets started before the elections. Even the rockets didn't only start after Hamas. After Hamas got elected, there was a reduction of rockets. They were trying to normalize ties. There was a reduction of rockets, and then there was the truce. There was the truce offering, which we outright rejected, and then shortly after there was the Gilad Shalit kidnapping. But the blockade, someone could fact check me. The blockade was even before that. They tried. And again, you could say they were lying. They were just trying to buy time.
Who built all the hospitals and the airports in Gaza then?
What year was that in, though?
What year? Right?
But what year was that?
It was during the occupation, but the intention at the time was to let the PA, from my understanding at least, maybe I'm just ignorant on history, but that was these elements.
That was in 1998, and then in 2001, 2000. Wait. It operated for a few years, and then in the second Intifada, it was already bombed and destroyed. So no, that wasn't relevant. That was second Intifada. It was like 3 years of airport. But again, I want us to look, if it's important
2008, did you say?
No, 1998 it was built. 2001 it was destroyed. But
2001. Okay.
We need to. I want us to. It's very easy to just point fingers and blame, but I want us, if we care about actually not needing to live by the sword, not needing to send our people to die and to kill, to stop dealing with terror attacks, and to stop having our security come at the expense of another people's freedom, we need to really ask ourselves what we could be doing differently. And when we really look at the past few decades, and I don't want to just be repetitive, but when we look at how we rewarded Hamas's violence and not rewarded the PA, and how we refused to negotiate with Hamas and just continue to kick the can down the road and continue to impose these conditions that aid in a population's radicalization, and then respond to violence with imposing more of the same conditions. And then the only thing we could fathom, the only thing we could come up with is it's them. They'll never agree to peace. It's Islam. It's whatever. We have every excuse in the book except for looking at what we could do differently. But if we really care about peace, we need to stop blaming others, and we need to actually look at our actions. And I think it's very, very clear that there is a lot, not just a little, a lot that we could do to change the situation. So I think this needs to be the conversation amongst Israelis. How many Israelis talk about this? We don't. We talk about, it's either, we'll criticize our government for internal stuff, but it's either we blame them or we just say there's nothing we could do, so we're just going to live our lives. We'll never solve it that way. Never. And I'll give you the last word, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I looked into it, and like between 2005 and 2007, there was like pretty free in and out from Gaza. It was like pretty sovereign as it could get. Yes, there was some sort of inspections on who comes in and comes out, but it was certainly not a siege. So I thought that I knew this, but now I know that I know this for now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, about what you said with the I mean, I guess. Oh yeah, the Palestinian Authority. You talked about the Palestinian Authority. So the Palestinian Authority, only like last year, when Israel is seriously talking about annexation, then they were like, "Wow, we need to put on a show." And then I think they had like one firefight or two firefights with some terrorists, and I think some of them died, some of the terrorists died. But this doesn't really change my argument. I think that. Do you have like a counter to that? Do you want to?
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, the security cooperation is from the early 2000s, from right after the second Intifada. There's been security cooperation with Israel. So
right, but I wouldn't call it security corporations when we're doing all the security and they're just incentivizing terror. Yes,
no, I don't think
by the way,
I don't think they incentivize terror. I think there's ways where they could disincentivize it more. But we have close cooperation with PA security forces. One of the reasons there hasn't been a third Intifada is because of the help of the PA. I don't think we can deny that. They're at this point.
I am denying that.
At this point, the PA is a proxy of Israel. Like it's not.
Again, before they've recently done this whole like shtick with after October 7th that they've started some gun battles. They never killed. Maybe once or twice you could
okay,
find
that bro,
the IDF is taken out.
We've never killed a settler engaging in violence against Palestinians. It's not so common. Okay, that's not. We don't shoot violent terrorists either, unless they're.
What does a security cooperation look like? We're the one controlling there. We're the one arresting.
No. Wait. Hold on.
The Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority literally arrests people who are charged with espionage for Israel. That's who they put in their prisons a lot of the time. Certainly, some of the more well-known Israeli spies were in the PA prisons for spying.
Okay. Okay. Wait. Hold on. But you could. That's like Jonathan Pollard was in U.S. prison for a long time. That doesn't speak to the alliance and security cooperation between the U.S. and Israel. So that's just a different crime that's unrelated to security cooperation. But the PA has arrested Palestinians for suspicion of terror in accordance with Israel. They give intel to Israel. There's close security cooperations. It's not they function side by side with one another.
I'm sure today there's maybe a little bit more, but
it's been this way for decades, and for decades they haven't. The PA hasn't attacked us for decades either. There's been no attack by the PA against Israel.
Of course, but listen to what you're saying. You're saying, of course, Abu Mazen, the only reason that he's in power is us. As soon as we leave him, he has no credit amongst Palestinians and he'll be overthrown within a day.
Why? Why?
Look at him. He's doing a security cooperation with us. Of course he is.
Yeah. Okay.
Why do you think after October 7th, when the Israeli government is the most right-wing, why do you think suddenly they're stepping up their efforts? Suddenly they've actually killed like a militant. When did they do that? Because they understand that we're holding a gun to their head. And when I'm saying they, I mean the PA.
If by holding a gun to their head, you're meaning that without us, they will collapse. Sure. And without them, Hamas might take over West Bank. Sure. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. I don't disagree with it, but I don't know what that negates. It just shows that we literally have a Palestinian faction that we've had security cooperations with for decades, and they've allowed us to stabilize the situation even while we maintain a brutal occupation over another group of people. And you said Abbas is not popular, for sure, because the Palestinians say, look, he's Israel's bitch, and what do we have to show for it, right? If Abbas, through his cooperation, achieved statehood for Palestinians, Abbas would be a hero. He would be the hero of Palestine. There would be no leader more popular than Abbas if he was able to convince.
Why did he refuse? Why did he refuse the
Ulmer plan? No, he didn't refuse. He just didn't respond in due time. This was when Ulmer was very unpopular, and it was already known that it was already suspected that he's not going to have much time. So he got an offer, and he didn't respond. Now I don't think.
Do you want me to explain to you why he didn't do that? Because he would not be in power. Hamas would be in power.
No. And I was actually going to say that. And I do think what you said is to a large extent true. It's not as simple. Whoever's the leader of Palestine has a very challenging job to not get killed by the extremist elements of their own society, right? So it's true. Abbas, and this is what makes it much harder for Palestinian leaders to accept a deal. They need to accept a deal that's good enough for them to not get killed. And I think we need to be honest about that. So, and even with Abbas, his being Israel's bitch essentially puts his life at risk. But yeah, accepting a bad deal that the population would view as bad very well might get him to get assassinated. We see something very similar with al-Shara in Syria. One of his right-hand men said, I think it was one of his right-hand men said, look, if he doesn't get at least part of the Golan back, he'll get killed if he normalizes with Israel. He'll be like Sadat.
Right.
They know this. So I think we should also recognize the challenging position they're in, but constantly we need to be working. Constantly we need to be working with them, making concessions, trying to improve the quality of their life, certainly not expanding and taking more land, certainly not letting settlers run wild and engaging in acts of violence, certainly not letting soldiers abuse their power by humiliating and abusing Palestinians, right? There's a lot we could do to improve the conditions for Palestinians that will make Palestinians more open to the idea of peace with us, which will also make it easier for a Palestinian leader to accept peace with us. So again, they have their work to do. Their leadership also is going to need to sell this to the population. But like, there's so much we could do to help get them to that point, and that's just not been our approach for decades now.
I'll say something that I think kind of briefs our disagreement.
Yeah.
And maybe this will kind of close.
Sure. Yeah. We'll end it on this.
Back and forth. You could respond absolutely, but it's pretty much like I think it kind of hits on the points. So basically, like what you're saying is, look, we've got all of these, zero rights that Jews have been getting by the Islamic world. They've been second-class citizens for thousands of years. But the moment we have a country, we have a superior obligation. Like we are these gods of people that have that adhere to the most insane amount of, like, everybody could be walking down the street and robbing each other. We're gonna be going the right way, even if we starve, which is what you're saying. So, right, we didn't have any rights for all of these years, but right now we had 10 opportunities to go ahead and take full sovereignty over the land, which we know will give us security. We know because it will give the good Palestinians what they want. It will separate them from the bad population because they'll be under Jewish rule. We'll have everything that we need to defend ourselves, but we don't do that because, God forbid, we do to the Muslims. We give them way better treatment that they've given us for thousands of years, and they still give us in their countries, right? Jews still don't have rights within Muslim countries, and that's according to their law. So you're saying we need to do all of that because we're some sort of like morally superior individuals. We're this amazing, creature given by God, and we adhere to, if we play, if we go to an MMA fight, we need to not be allowed to kick or give a punch, right? We're not allowed. They're allowed to do it, but we're not allowed. Even if even if we live in their world, whether you want it or not, even if it doesn't suit Western narrative, that obviously Israel is the big dog and the Arabs are the underdogs. We realize that this is not true. Even if we kept winning them, that doesn't mean that the power balance is that way. The power balance is that we're surrounded by a lot of people that don't like us, and we need to be as strong as possible to fend them off. And if what you're saying is we need to go ahead and make ourselves as small as possible, we can do that in a ghetto in Europe. We don't need to do that in Israel, which is meant to be the complete opposite from a ghetto that is becoming, smaller and smaller until people just kill every single one. right? I don't think I have to like say anymore. You can respond.
That's the thing. I have a lot to respond, but I know if I respond, then you're going to want to respond, and it's just going to keep going.
No, you could like say something brief, because like basically I don't think. Yeah,
All right. So look. Okay.
Go.
So I don't think that the reason why we don't take sovereignty over the whole land and make it Israel is because we're too nice. It's because we don't want to need to be fully responsible for the entire population, entire Palestinian population, and need to deal with the implications of that, both in the eyes of the international community and what that means domestically. I don't think our policy is let's be nice to them. It's purely self-interested. That's one. Two, on a personal level, my morality has absolutely nothing to do with other people's morality. For me, it's what I want to live by a life of virtue based on what I believe to be right. I expect that of myself and of the country I'm living in and paying taxes to. So to point to how another country might treat us had we been there, I just don't even think about that. That's just not how I decide what's right or wrong. Three, I guess this doesn't matter, but the whole MMA thing, it's not the correct analogy. It depends how you're looking at it, but the more powerful an entity, the higher standard they should be held to. So if an MMA fighter is in a street fight against somebody who is not in MMA, well, then maybe the MMA fighter should only punch and kick, while the person who doesn't have experience will maybe go for low blows because he has a severe disadvantage. That's probably a more fitting analogy if you want to look at it that way. But when there's and I've spoken about this many times just on this stream, much weaker sides are going to resort to different tactics than the more powerful side. And there's a much greater cost when a powerful side acts recklessly than when somebody weak acts recklessly. So our moral consideration, or our outrage for recklessness or for violations of human rights, should increase the more powerful an entity is. I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at things and judging entities.
Can I just say one word?
Yeah.
Like,
You'll get the.
I know we're really.
No, all good.
But let me just. But the only thing I will say is, like, if we're talking in MMA fights, like if you win, you get the medal. Nobody else gets to contend if you win the final, right? And this is something that we don't know how to do with Jews. Maybe we're too used to the ghettos in Europe.
We have a country. We obtained sovereignty after thousands of years of exile. That's a medal.
We still live in a ghetto, like in Europe. But
I would agree with you that
we're not used to winning. When have we won? When have we won the last time? A war? 1967. That's the only time we've ever won a war. And ever since then, we've stopped winning. Beforehand, we also didn't want to win.
I think that's just because guerrilla warfare is very hard to fight against, and we're fighting against a population that is very determined for their rights, and they're not going to. Yeah. But whatever, to be continued.
Yeah, to be continued. Exactly. That was too much.
Anand,
good speaking to you.
Yeah, thanks for joining. I'm glad you hopped on.
Yeah, I appreciate you a lot. I think you're one of like the few leftists that I feel like they don't shy away from a good conversation. So, well, leftists or left-wing Israelis, you could say.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm a traditional leftist, but in Israel, I'm definitely considered on the left. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
An Israeli leftist.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not an American leftist. I'm an Israeli leftist. Yeah. I'm an American liberal, but not an American leftist. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And when I'm in Jerusalem, we'll meet up one of these days.
Yep.
Cool, brother.
Bye.
Okay, so let's see. Maybe we'll do 3 hours 43 minutes. We'll do 10 more minutes Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. King of J says, "Whining lib cuck Adar." I'm not really big on whining, to be completely honest. I'm big on winning. That's for sure. Pal Sear saying, King, you sound like a woke right NPC cuck. Yeah, yeah. It's always the internet tough guys that call people cucks, that are just nasty. Generally, they're the most pathetic, insecure, not doing well in life, too scared to show their face. That's the type, you know? I pity them. I pity them. King of J says, winning what? I don't know. Winning at life, I guess. I have a pretty good life. I have all my needs met. I have an amazing family, amazing group of friends. Building businesses, building community. Doing my small part to have a positive impact in the world. What are you doing, my guy? Besides just hiding behind a screen in your mom's basement eating cornflakes, huh? What are you doing? Palsier says Khabib is watching, LOL. What's that in reference to? Is Khabib watching the stream right now? That'd be hilarious. You know what's funny? If we're on the topic of MMA, you know who watches some of the content and comments? Firas Zahabi, GSP's coach. So that's kind of cool. He watches Firas Zahabi. He's a pretty legendary coach too. Let's see what else we have here. It's a good stream. I like these spontaneous streams. You never know where they're going to go. Palsier says, I'd vote for Adar over Abbas as PM of Palestine. Huh. Should I run for Palestinian elections? So guys, I guess we'll do an after party here on Discord. I'm going to hop off, but let's drop a link. The conversation will continue. A group of awesome people. Anan will be there. Some other great people will be there. Israelis, Palestinians, Muslims, Arabs, or Muslims, Jews, atheists, everything in between. I'm dropping a link in chat. Levi Katzman is asking, who's the caller? So Levi, I think you're late. You're watching this. You're not watching this on Discord, right? The caller's Anan, who's the Israeli G. He's on Discord. Let's see. Anan, what channel can't you see? What are you saying? We're going to do this in the open dialogue. Actually, let's just, we're just going to, no, we're going to do this in the open dialogue circle. You'll see I created a chill room there. So that's where we're going to hop it into. I just want to make sure everybody has the right tab. So Omar, I know you do. Cool. Nevio, how did you not have the open dialogue tag? You have it now. Nevio, I guess that means you haven't been around. Well, it's good to see you back here. Okay, cool. Everyone's got it. Dun, dun, dun. Emperor Ghidorah, we'll make this the final question. Should we all pity basement dwelling shit talkers? Yeah, we should, because people don't choose. You know, it's funny. We were talking about collective agency as opposed to individual agency. So individual agency is important because a society that has a concept of agency that becomes part of the conditions that impact our decisions. But even within society, it's not like, and people get triggered by this concept, but I'm a very strong believer that we don't have free will. It doesn't mean we don't have choices and we can't choose, but our choices are a result of hundreds of thousands of biochemical reactions in our brain that precede the decision we make. These are biochemical reactions we do not choose. It's the choice pops into our mind, we take it, and we believe we made that choice in our free will. We have the illusion of free will. Now, without getting overly philosophical, that's high level how I think our brain actually functions. But the implications of that, there's good implications and bad implications. But one of the, I guess, positive ones is it allows us to be more empathetic towards people who do bad things and make bad decisions. So some basement dwelling cornflakes eater, when they're there typing, being mean, in their mind, they believe that what they're doing is the right thing. Whatever happened, whether it's their biology or their upbringing, it's almost certainly a combination of both, but the combination of things that are out of their control, their upbringing and biology and environment, right? These are not in people's control, led them to the place where they believe that just being an online troll is good, and being nasty is good, and being mean to people is good. So yeah, that's something we should pity. If you were born in their shoes, you would reach these same conclusions. You would be in the basement also, hitting them with all this, toxic bullshit. So seeing the world this way is helpful in allowing us to be more empathetic towards people we generally struggle with. Now, again, we still need the concept. The concept of agency is important. Personal responsibility, it's very important, right? You take that out of a society, society is worse off. So I'm not making any case to get rid of that. That's still important concepts. But when really look at where decisions come from, we're just, that's just who we are and how we function. King of Jace says, never address the argument, always in ad hominem. I have a feeling you're new here, buddy, but what is it that, what argument do you feel that I have refused to address? What argument did you make that I didn't address? I'll wait a few minutes. We'll give you a minute to let me know what you feel like I'm shying away from. Type away, buddy. What is it? What I do is, I engage in snark. I match people's energy. I think it's good for entertainment value. So if you hit me, the first thing I've ever heard from you is you're a whining cuck. What do you expect? That's also victim mentality. These online people are always the perpetual victims. Dish out. What's the saying? Don't dish out what you can't. I'm so, I wish I was better at better at idioms, proverbs, and different sayings. Don't dish out what you can't serve. For whatever reason, I'm bad at remembering them, but it would enrich my ability to explain things or enhance my ability. What is the proper saying? Don't dish out what you can't take. There's also a related version. Don't dish out if you can't take it. Is that really it? Don't dish out what you can't take? Okay, well, don't dish out what you can't take, my guy. So King of Joyce, you didn't tell me what argument I didn't address. You just said you'll call in another day, and then you go, you're a passive aggressive cuck. Okay. We see the quality of your arguments. You really produced and provided a lot of value for the stream today. Should hope you could sleep well at night. Cool. With that, signing off. What else are we going to do? We are on Tuesday. I think I'm going to do something new. Altoids, I see you raising your hand, but we're wrapping it up, so not today. But we are going to move this over to the chill room in the open dialogue circle. If you join and you don't have access to Open Dialogue Circle, just DM me and I'll give you access. But Tuesday, Emperor, you want me to react to a quick clip? How quick is it? Tell me how many minutes it is and I'll decide. But Tuesday, I'm going to do a Twitter space, an Open Dialogue Twitter space that will be live streamed to YouTube. We'll do an hour on Twitter, and then we're going to bring it over to Discord for a more private session, trying something new. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, 30-second clip. Yeah, send it over. Let's do it. We'll end it on something fun. Chief Wiggum says, Adar, come on, you know Israeli society is toxic. There's certainly aspects of it, but this guy's not Israeli. You could tell by how you could tell that he's not. You could tell he comes from the red pill movement. Like he likes Andrew Tate. He thinks Andrew Tate is based. You could tell he's of that type. Actually, maybe not, because Andrew Tate really hates Israel. So this might be one of the Zionists. So maybe I got that wrong. But he liked Andrew Tate up until the moment that Andrew Tate went anti-Israel. That's for sure. Like you can't know, but very well maybe incel adjacent, you know. You're saying he's apostate prophet, people. I know them. Oh, so doesn't like Muslims. Is that what it is? Apostate prophets come in Israel. Did you see that? Gidor, are you sending me the clip? I'd be down to have a conversation with apostate prophet. That'd be an interesting one. Hi, Ghidorah. It's a 60-second countdown, and if you can't find it, then we'll just need to do it another time. Hazy says Adar is right about free will. I mean, it's one of the beliefs I am most confident in. It's there's some opinions that I will acknowledge that I might be wrong about. But I mean, this is almost certain, the no free will one. If you really think about it, it's just a hard one to accept because it makes us feel like our whole life is unraveling in front of us. What's even the point of living if everything we're gonna do is, in a sense, predetermined? Although it doesn't mean it's predetermined, because there still might be randomness that's playing in to right. There might be some quantum element to how our brain works that's random, but random isn't free. It's random, right? So it's either there's kind of two states. There's predetermined. How could predetermined be free? And random. How's random free? How does random plus predetermined equal freedom? So there's not really freedom in the equation. Chief Wiggum says, is Alon Mizrahi lying? I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't think he's lying, but he doesn't mean every opinion he has is correct or that I agree with, you know? But what's the question? What's the question we're talking about right now? Hi, Ghidorah, I think we're gonna need to do this another time. Apostate prophet tried to LARP as an Orthodox Christian, but injected his Zionist agenda, and most of us unorthodox Christians reject this. Interesting, okay. King of Jace says, Alon Mizrahi is a mentally ill cave ape that should go back to Morocco. Interesting. I mean, he sometimes seems a little bit stable with what he says, but I mean, my guy, you don't seem so stable either. So, you know. Okay. Anyways, Ghidorah, next time I'm gonna stream again soon, so we'll find a time to do it. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. This was fun. We're gonna continue this on Discord. I'll drop a link one last time. If you don't have access to the open dialogue circle where the chill room is, DM me and I'll give it to you. And yeah, if not, I'll see you on Tuesday. Much love from the Western Galilee in the beautiful land of Israel and Palestine. Until next time, friends.